Chapter 1, Don't? I'm begging you. Rhiannon Somers was forcefully dragged into a private lounge at the engagement party by Ethan Crawford. The moment the door closed, the man slammed her against it, ripping her clothes open as his hands roamed wantonly over her skin. Ethan, if you touch me here, aren't you afraid your fiancé out there will find out? Won't she be upset? Rhiannon's slender body trembled uncontrollably, but her words betrayed no hint of surrender. Ethan let out a cold laugh. I want to have you right here, at my engagement party, Rhiannon. Don't you just love sleeping with men? Does it thrill you to have me take you with all these guests just outside the door? Beyond the door, the hall was filled with guests attending the engagement party of Ethan Crawford and Cecilia Somers. A sharp pain pierced Rhiannon's heart. She dug her nails into the wooden door. In his eyes, she was nothing but a promiscuous wretch. That's why he never showed her any mercy when he tortured her. A sour, churning ache filled her chest, but Rhiannon desperately held back her tears. She couldn't cry in front of him. It would mean losing the last shred of her dignity. He hated her, wished he could be rid of her. And that, as it happened, was exactly what she wanted too. Yes, I'm absolutely thrilled, Rhiannon shot back with a steady, mocking tone. To be taken by my future brother-in-law at my disgusting sister's engagement party. I couldn't be happier. Rhiannon, Ethan viciously gripped the back of her neck, his voice a low, cold warning. I won't let you call Cec. Disgusting, you're the most sickening woman I know. What right do you have to talk about her? Rhiannon closed her eyes in pain, yet a smile played on her lips. You're right. I'm the most vicious, most despicable woman on earth. But for you to still be able to touch me, Ethan, that makes you just as disgusting as I am, she retorted without hesitation, though her heart felt as if it were bleeding. What's the matter? Has my disfigured, one-legged sister lost her appeal? Or is her frail body just not enough to satisfy you? Rhiannon's nails dug deep into the wall. As if abandoning all hope, she deliberately used the most venomous words she could muster. Her behavior succeeded in enraging Ethan, just as she'd intended. He grabbed her hair, pulling with such force it seemed he meant to lift her off the ground, forcing her to tilt back her exquisitely made-up, bewitching face. Rhiannon, Ceci is like this because of you. If it weren't for you, how could she have been disfigured and lost a leg? He stared at her ferociously, his eyes filled with hatred. And you still have the gall to talk like this. You truly are a wretch. Rhiannon looked up at him, her pale complexion completely masked by the heavy makeup. She looked so beautiful, so enchanting. I am shameless. If you've got the guts, then stop wasting your breath and just kill me. She smiled at him, a captivating smile, but deep within her eyes lay a shattered pain. Ethan's words were ice. Don't think I wouldn't dare. Rhiannon stretched her neck forward. Then do it. Strangle me, put an end to it all. Ethan stared at her, then suddenly laughed. Letting you die so easily would be getting off too lightly. I'm going to keep you alive and torture you. I'll make you pay for what you did 100 times over. With that, he shoved Rhiannon to the floor. After a single cold glance, he turned and left the small lounge. Crash, the door was slammed shut with a deafening bang. Rhiannon knelt alone on the cold floor. The tears she had held back for so long finally fell. And along with the tears, blood began to gush from her nose. Rhiannon frantically fumbled in her purse for tissues to staunch the flow. A torrent of blood gushed out, quickly soaking an entire pack of tissues in a brilliant, garish red. Staring at the glaring crimson, Rhiannon felt a wave of despair wash over her. Her time was running out. Chapter 2, Rhiannon wiped the blood from her nose and face, then took out her compact mirror to meticulously reapply her makeup, ensuring no trace of her illness was visible. She stuffed the blood-soaked tissues into her purse before finally standing up and pushing open the lounge door with an air of proud confidence. As she stepped out, the chatter of the guests came to an abrupt halt. The atmosphere instantly turned cold and silent. Cecilia Somers, her manipulative half-sister, sat in a wheelchair, her eyes fixed on Rhiannon with a venomous glare she couldn't hide. The tension was bizarre. Rhiannon's eyes swept over the guests, but to her surprise, she didn't see Ethan. She pressed her red lips together, ignoring the strange looks from everyone, and lifted her slender legs, intending to leave. Rhiannon, stop right there. Her stepmother, Yvette Shaw, called out to her. I need to talk to you. Come with me. As she spoke, Yvette was already upon her, grabbing Rhiannon's arm and forcibly pulling her toward the second floor. Mom, I'll come with you. Cecilia chimed in, pushing her wheelchair to follow. As soon as they were out of earshot, the guests immediately began to whisper among themselves. Rhiannon and Mr. Crawford came out of that lounge one after the other. Who knows what they were doing in there? Tusk, that Rhiannon is just as shameless as the rumors say, fooling around with her brother-in-law at her own sister's engagement party. What a floozy. Walking in her high heels, Rhiannon heard the hushed gossip, her back ramrod straight. The moment they entered the second-floor lounge, Yvette swung her hand and slapped Rhiannon hard across the face. "Rhiannon, how dare you seduce your own brother-in-law? I've never seen a more shameless woman than you," Yvette screamed, her face contorted with vicious anger, raising her hand to strike again. Rhiannon took half a step back and caught Yvette's wrist just before the palm could land. "I may be shameless, but are you any better? What about when you seduced my father? That was true shamelessness," she shot back without hesitation. The thing Yvette hated most was people bringing up her past as the other woman. "That's because your mother was incompetent. You can't blame me for that," Rhiannon sneered. "Well then, if I seduced Ethan today, it's because your daughter is incompetent. What right do you have to settle scores with me now?" Yvette was so furious she was at a loss for words, pointing a trembling finger at Rhiannon and stammering, You. Her expression twisted. "Rhiannon, I'll tear your face off today." Unable to win with words, she resorted to violence. Rhiannon dodged her outstretched claws. Before Yvette could even touch her, she slipped and fell to the ground. "Rhiannon, how could you raise a hand to my mother? She's your mother now too," Cecilia shouted in alarm, ramming her wheelchair toward Rhiannon. Rhiannon's back was already against the wall, leaving her no room to escape. She raised a hand to block the chair. But before her fingers could even touch the wheelchair, Cecilia let out a sudden shriek and tumbled out of it, her forehead crashing hard against the coffee table. A stream of blood gushed out. "Ah, sis, please stop hitting my mother and me." Cecilia clutched her bleeding forehead, her eyes fixed on Rhiannon with a sinister glare. Yet the sound that came from her mouth was sharp and tragic. It was as if Rhiannon were truly assaulting the two of them. Rhiannon watched their performance with a cold, calm smile, quietly waiting for the commotion to draw the guests over. Sure enough, within seconds, the guests arrived. When they saw Cecilia and her mother on the floor, their gazes toward Rhiannon became even more contemptuous and disdainful. "Miss Somers, no matter what, today is your sister's engagement party. How could you treat them like this?" "Exactly, this is just too much." Rhiannon's face was a cold mask, as if she hadn't heard their sharp, mocking words at all. She straightened up and walked directly toward the door. At that moment, the sound of steady footsteps echoed down the long corridor. Ethan, who had been absent all this time, had arrived. Chapter 3, as Rhiannon reached the doorway, she came face to face with the approaching Ethan. His dark, inscrutable eyes stared at her, filled with a somber intensity. "Rhiannon, what kind of game are you playing now?" he demanded, his voice laced with undisguised displeasure and anger. Rhiannon looked up at him, unafraid. "You saw what happened, didn't you? Why are you asking me?" Ethan's gaze shifted past her, landing on Cecilia, whose head was covered in blood. His eyes instantly turned cold. He took a step forward, his intimidating presence closing in on Rhiannon. "Did you bully Ceci again?" Every word dripped with ice. Rhiannon clenched her fists, her nails digging into the soft flesh of her palms. The faint pain helped to steady her. "What do you think?" she retorted, hiding the deep disappointment and sorrow in her eyes. She already knew his answer. Ever since the incident 5 years ago, he had never believed a word she said. Ethan stared at her, his face frighteningly grim. "Ethan, don't blame my sister. I fell by accident." Cecilia struggled to prop herself up from the floor, looking at Ethan with a pitiful, vulnerable expression. "It's all my fault. Please don't scold her." "Cecilia, don't you ever get tired of this act?" Rhiannon was sick of her phony pretense and couldn't help but sneer. "A moment ago, you were screaming at the top of your lungs, making sure the whole world heard your deceitful cries. Now that everyone's here, why have you stopped performing?" "Sis, how could you say that about me?" Cecilia's eyes widened, her expression wounded, as if she were on the verge of tears. "Today is my engagement party, can't you just? Cecilia, haven't you had enough of this act?" The thought that this was Ethan and Cecilia's engagement party sent an unbearable ache through Rhiannon's heart. One was the man she loved most. The other was one of the murderers who had caused her mother's death. the person she hated most, and now, these two were together. How ironic, how cruel. Stop with your sanctimonious posturing in front of me. It's disgusting. Slap. A hand struck Rhiannon's face with brutal force. Ethan's slap cut her words short. Rhiannon, I won't allow you to speak to Ceci like that. He stared at her, his face a cold mask, his eyes glaring as if she were his mortal enemy. You're the most disgusting woman in the world. Yvette seized the opportunity and chimed in. That's right, if it weren't for you, would our Ceci be in this state? That scar on her face is because of you. We were kind enough to accept you despite everything, but we never expected you to be so malicious. Rhiannon, you're not even human. As she finished, the surrounding guests looked at Rhiannon with even more disgust, as if they were all thinking, so that's the kind of woman she is, a vile, vicious floozy. Rhiannon clenched her fists so tightly that her nails broke the skin of her palms, but she no longer felt the pain. Only a coldness that seeped from her very bones. Yes, in everyone else's eyes, she was the bad woman. Shameless, seducing her brother-in-law, bullying her sister, a venomous wretch. But how could these people possibly know what Yvette and Cecilia had done to her behind the scenes? They had conspired to drive her mother to her death. Then they had treated her like a servant, ordering her around. In the past, they would frequently punish her by forbidding her to eat for a day or sleep in her bed, forcing her to reflect in the basement for mistakes she had never even made. These people would never see their wickedness, and even if they did, no one would believe it. Not even Ethan believed her, let alone these strangers. Rhiannon had no desire to explain. She just curled her lips into a cold smile, silently swallowing all the false accusations. Get out, Rhiannon, Ethan said again, this time an unforgiving order to leave. Rhiannon smiled faintly, clutched her purse, and walked away without a backward glance. She really should get out. No one here welcomed her. Only after she had walked out of the villa did a tear slide from the corner of her eye. Perhaps she shouldn't have come back at all. It was time to leave. It was for the best. She didn't want to die here, not within Ethan's sight. Chapter 4. On the way back to her apartment, Rhiannon booked a flight. The moment she got home, she started packing. Pulling out a suitcase, she knelt on the carpet and began placing her few belongings inside, one by one. She didn't have much, but it took her a full half-hour to pack. Deep down, she still wanted to linger in the city for a little longer. She wanted to revisit all the places she and Ethan had gone on dates. But alas, there was no chance for that now. Rhiannon closed the suitcase. Just as she stood up, her vision suddenly went black, and she lost consciousness in an instant. Her slender body fell with a soft thud onto the carpet. Dark red blood gushed from her small nose. When she woke up again, it was late at night. Rhiannon had been unconscious on the carpet all afternoon. The blood from her nose had dried and caked on her face, leaving her looking pale and disheveled. A large, vivid bloodstain remained on the carpet. Rhiannon silently grabbed a few tissues, trying to wipe the stain away, but the blood had dried completely. It wouldn't come off. Just like her incurable disease, it could never be erased. Rhiannon sank powerlessly onto the carpet, wrapped her arms around her knees, and buried her face in despair. Because she had fainted, Rhiannon missed her flight. She had to rebook for noon the next day. She had no appetite for dinner. After a quick shower, she fell into a restless sleep. She had just drifted off when, in a state between dreaming and waking, she felt a sudden weight on her. A hot, heavy male body pressed down on her. Rhiannon instantly snapped awake, on high alert, pushing against the man on top of her. "Who is it? Get away from me," a large hand immediately clamped around her neck. A familiar, deep male voice spoke coldly. "Rhiannon, why are you fighting me? Don't you love being taken by men?" It was Ethan. The room was dark, and Rhiannon couldn't see his face clearly, but the chilling aura emanating from him was unmistakable, freezing her heart with pain. "Ethan, how did you get in? Get out," she struggled. Ethan pinned her wrists, leaning in so close his thin lips almost touched the tip of her nose. "Get out," he said mockingly. "What, so you can kick me out and go find some other man?" Rhiannon didn't understand what he meant, but she answered stubbornly, "So what if I do? Anyone can touch me, except you." Ethan's eyes instantly turned menacing. With a swift motion, he ripped off her pajamas. Buttons popped, revealing large patches of her pale skin. "Ethan, what are you doing?" "Let go of me," Rhiannon thrashed wildly. "Don't touch me," Ethan ignored her, instead grabbing at her pajama pants with a cruel, aggressive force. Rhiannon, not only will I touch you, I'm going to make you bear my child. Chapter 5. Ethan ignored her pleas, instead grabbing at her pajama pants with a cruel, aggressive force. Rhiannon, not only will I touch you, I'm going to make you bear my child. Rhiannon was stunned, her eyes widening as she stared at the man before her. What did you say? Bear a child? Her frail, sick body was in no condition to carry another child. Besides her disease, there was a high probability it was hereditary. And 5 years ago, after she'd gone abroad, she had already secretly given birth to his daughter Daisy without Ethan ever knowing. Thanks to you, Cecily's body is too weak. Having a child would be too risky for her, Ethan glared at Rhiannon. But the Crawford family needs an heir. So you will be the one to bear this child. You're a wretch anyway, so giving birth to a baby means nothing to you. Rhiannon's body, once rigid, began to grow cold. He was going to use her as a birthing machine. No, how could he be so cruel? Ethan, I won't have a child for you, she said, pressing her lips together and enunciating each word with force. I would rather die. I'm leaving tomorrow, but Ethan yanked her back with brutal strength. A sharp pain shot through her, and Rhiannon's face turned pale as she began to struggle even more desperately. But her strength was no match for his. She was like a fish on a chopping block, completely powerless. Rhiannon, you have no choice in this matter. You will bear this child. Whether you want to or not, Ethan tormented her for half the night. When it was finally over, Rhiannon was half dead, her hair disheveled as she lay sprawled on the large bed, her face as white as a sheet, gasping for breath. Ethan tossed her aside like a rag doll and went into the bathroom. The sound of the shower filled the room. Rhiannon closed her eyes, exhausted. Her whole body ached, but the deepest pain was in her heart. She had never imagined Ethan's hatred for her ran this deep. But maybe this was for the best. Her terminal illness meant she didn't have long to live anyway. If he wanted to hate her, let him. But the child, she really couldn't have another one. She would die sooner or later, and the child would be left without a mother. Daisy still had Luke Langley to look after her, but this child... Ethan hated her so much. And then there was Cecilia, and Yvette. They were all enemies who would love to see her torn to pieces. If she left a child behind, they would surely torment it until its life was a living hell. The sound of the shower stopped. Ethan emerged from the bathroom, dressed in a sharp suit, looking noble and elegant, and her, half naked and utterly wretched. Ethan walked to the bedside, looking down at her with cold indifference. At dawn, I'll have someone pick you up and take you to the Crawford estate. You are not to leave until you've given me a child. Rhiannon closed her eyes, too weak to answer. Ethan stared at her for a few more moments, his eyes dark and grim, before finally turning to leave. Crash, he slammed the door shut. The loud noise made Rhiannon's body tremble, and cold tears slid from the corners of her eyes once more. She lay in bed for a while, gathering what little strength she had, before forcing herself to get up. She had to go by Plan B. She couldn't get pregnant. She couldn't give birth to this child. But the moment her feet touched the floor, her knees buckled, and she collapsed with a thud. Her body ached too much. She had no strength to walk. The cold floor sent shivers through her, but she didn't even have the energy to push herself up again. After crawling for some time, she managed to pull herself up by the bed, sitting on the edge, panting softly. Her vision blurred, and waves of dizziness washed over her. Rhiannon couldn't hold on any longer and fainted again. After leaving Rhiannon's apartment, Ethan sat in his car, chain-smoking one cigarette after another. That filthy, despicable woman actually wanted to leave. 5 years ago, she ran off with Luke Langley. Now she'd only been back for 2 months and was already planning to leave again. Was she going back to Luke Langley? What a floozy. Ethan took a harsh drag from his cigarette, the small car filling with swirling smoke. He wouldn't let her leave just like that. He would make her pay, twice over, for what she owed him from 5 years ago. He would make that woman's life a living hell. Crushing the cigarette butt, Ethan started the car and sped toward the Crawford estate. The lights in the living room were still on. Cecilia was waiting for him. Seeing Ethan return, she quickly pushed her wheelchair toward him. "Ethan, you're finally back?" A sweet smile graced her face. Even though she knew the man she loved had just been with that harlot Rhiannon, she didn't say a word, not even asking where he'd been. On the surface, she was always so understanding. Ethan glanced at her and grunted noncommittally. "It's so late, why aren't you in bed?" he asked softly. Cecilia wheeled herself to his side and looked up at him. "I was waiting for you." Ethan's expression flickered, a hint of guilt crossing his features. He reached out and stroked the top of her head like a brother to a sister. "It's getting late. You're not well, so don't stay up. Get some rest." He started to head upstairs. Cecilia quickly grabbed his hand. "Ethan, darling," she said softly, "from today on, I'm your fiancé." Her soft fingers traced his palm suggestively, her moist eyes full of allure. "I want to have a child for you, our child. Besides, the Crawford family needs an heir." Ethan looked down at Cecilia's adoring eyes and slowly pulled his hand away. "You're not well enough. You can't have children. As for the baby, I'll have Rhiannon bear it for you. I'll bring her over tomorrow." Cecilia froze, but Ethan had already started up the stairs. She stared at his back, the innocent expression on her face slowly twisting into a sinister grimace. "Ethan, darling, let me go pick her up," Cecilia called out, her voice still sweet and soft. "I'll personally bring my sister to our home." Ethan paused, his eyes dark and brooding. After a few seconds of silence, he simply said, "Fine." Chapter 6. When Rhiannon woke up, it was already bright outside. She couldn't remember how many times she had fainted because of her illness. Her body still ached terribly. Wearily, she pushed herself up and went to the bathroom for a shower. The warm, bright light of the bathroom illuminated the bruises, both old and new, that littered her body with stark clarity. She examined them, inch by inch, a bitter smile on her lips. Ethan was truly merciless. Why hadn't he just killed her last night? After getting dressed, Rhiannon grabbed her suitcase and headed for the door. She had to leave. But when she pulled the door open, she was met with Cecilia's face. "What are you doing here?" Rhiannon frowned, her voice cold. A phony, sweet smile spread across Cecilia's lips. "Ethan, darling, asked me to come and pick you up, to come live with us." Rhiannon's expression darkened, her fingers unconsciously tightening on the handle of her suitcase. "I'm sorry, I'm not going." With that, she tried to walk past Cecilia. Suddenly, her path was blocked. Two tall, imposing men stood in her way. Cecilia wheeled herself into Rhiannon's apartment, tossing a chilling remark over her shoulder, "Bring her into the room. I have a few things I need to have a good chat with her about." The two bodyguards complied, grabbing Rhiannon's wrists and dragging her into the apartment. "Let go of me," Rhiannon struggled fiercely, but her strength was no match for the two brawny men. She was dragged into the room. The commotion in the hallway was loud enough to alert the neighbors. Rhiannon heard a neighbor's door open and quickly cried out, "Help MMPH!" One of the bodyguards swiftly clamped a hand over her mouth, then roughly threw her into the room. Slam! The door was violently shut. Cecilia sat calmly in the middle of the living room, while Rhiannon was forcefully pushed to the floor by the two men, landing at Cecilia's feet. "I don't know what Ethan, darling, was thinking. Having you bear his child, you're such a harlot. Any child you have will be just as worthless." The fall sent a sharp pain through Rhiannon's knees. She had been tormented all night, and her body was already weak. Now, after being manhandled by the bodyguards, she felt dizzy and faint. Clenching her teeth, Rhiannon fought back the wave of dizziness and looked up, sneering at Cecilia. "I'm worthless, and what are you? Your mother was just the other woman, and you're nothing but a bastard child born of an affair." "Cecilia, you're no better than me." Cecilia's face turned black. That was the one stain on her life. Her mother was a mistress. "Slap her," Cecilia shrieked at the two bodyguards. "Slap her hard, let's see if she dares to run her mouth again." The bodyguards moved to obey, raising their hands to strike Rhiannon. "Cecilia, if you dare hit me, aren't you afraid Ethan will find out and you won't be able to explain it?" Rhiannon said coldly. "In his eyes, you're a sweet, innocent little rabbit. If he finds out you hit me, will he still believe you're so guiltless?" The bodyguards paused, looking to Cecilia for confirmation. Cecilia's nails dug into the armrests of her wheelchair. It was true. If Ethan saw Rhiannon's face swollen and red, she would have no way to explain it. But to let this insult slide was even more impossible. A vicious, cold smile slowly spread across Cecilia's lips. "Then hit her where no one can see. Don't be too rough. We don't want her unable to walk." That way, Ethan would never find out. The bodyguards followed her orders, pinching and twisting Rhiannon's slender body, leaving her already bruised skin with not a single patch of good flesh. Rhiannon endured the pain, biting her lower lip so hard that it bled. Cecilia watched from her wheelchair with a triumphant smile, finally satisfied by the sight of Rhiannon's agony. She raised a hand to stop them. "That's enough." Wheeling her chair closer, Cecilia approached the curled-up form of Rhiannon on the floor. She admired Rhiannon's pained, pale face and smirked. "Let me tell you something, Rhiannon. This is just the beginning. Once you step foot into the Crawford estate, I will find every possible way to torture you. I'll make your life a living hell." Chapter 7. The bodyguards were indeed skilled. They inflicted pain all over Rhiannon's body, yet no single spot was so injured that it would prevent her from walking normally. Finally, Cecilia ordered the two men to lift Rhiannon and carry her to the car. After 2 days of continuous torment and having rushed out that morning without breakfast, Rhiannon was utterly drained and weak. Her head spun, and she felt on the verge of fainting at any moment. Yet Cecilia wouldn't let her be, scratching Rhiannon's thighs with her nails throughout the car ride. Whenever Rhiannon tried to resist, one of the bodyguards would grab her hands, restraining her while allowing Cecilia to torment her even more freely. By the time they reached the Crawford estate, Rhiannon barely had the strength to get out of the car. Cecilia remained seated and asked the butler waiting outside, "Is Ethan Darling home?" The butler replied respectfully, "The young master went to the office. He hasn't returned yet." Cecilia nodded, then instructed the bodyguards, "Rhiannon can't walk, help her inside." "Yes, ma'am." The two men immediately hauled Rhiannon up, dragging her like a prisoner into the living room and dropping her onto the floor with a thud. Cecilia paid her no mind, accepting a cup of tea from a maid, and then, right in front of Rhiannon, started making a phone call. "Ethan, darling, I've brought my sister home. I just told the butler to prepare a feast to welcome her. Will you be back for lunch?" Rhiannon listened with her head down, her face expressionless. "No need for a welcome feast." "How could that be right?" Cecilia pouted, her voice soft and sweet. "It's all right, I don't mind what happened in the past. She is my sister, after all. You focus on your work. I'll hang up now." Rhiannon let out a cold laugh. It was a real shame Cecilia hadn't become an actress. Cecilia put down the phone, her smile triumphant and sharp. "Since Ethan Darling said there's no need to prepare a welcome feast for you, then you won't be eating lunch today. Lock her in her room. No food or water." As soon as she finished speaking, the bodyguards moved, dragging Rhiannon upstairs and throwing her into a guest room. The door was then locked with a decisive click. Rhiannon closed her eyes, having no will or energy to struggle. She lay sprawled on the carpet and drifted into a hazy sleep. She didn't know how much time had passed when hunger and thirst woke her. Including yesterday, she had gone nearly 24 hours without a drop of water. Her lips were dry and cracked, and she was dizzy with hunger. She pushed herself up using the wall and looked around the room. As expected, there wasn't even a teapot. With a faint smile, she stumbled to the bathroom, turned on the tap, and drank a few mouthfuls of tap water to quench her thirst. Staring at her own deathly pale, almost tragic reflection in the mirror, Rhiannon slowly closed her eyes. She had no intention of dying in the Crawford estate. She didn't want Cecilia to know and mock her for her terminal illness, and she certainly didn't want Ethan to watch her waste away day by day. She had to find a way to escape from here. Dizziness washed over her again. To conserve energy, Rhiannon lay down on the bed and drifted back into a groggy sleep. In a state between dream and reality, she vaguely heard footsteps and the sound of a wheelchair outside the door. Then came Cecilia's sweet, concerned voice. "My sister hasn't eaten a thing since she arrived. She's locked herself in her room and won't let anyone in." Cecilia's voice then took on a wronged tone. "I wanted to bring her a bowl of porridge, but she just yelled at me. Ethan, darling, it seems my sister really doesn't want to live with us." Hearing Cecilia twist the facts, Rhiannon found it laughable. But what was even more laughable was that Ethan actually believed her. The next second, the door was violently thrown open by Ethan. The light from the hallway spilled in, silhouetting his tall, imposing figure, making him look even more intimidating. He stood at the doorway, staring coldly from several feet away at Rhiannon, who was curled up on the bed. "If she won't eat, then have someone force-feed her." Chapter 8. A male and a female servant then entered the room, carrying a bowl of congee and a bowl of chicken soup. Rhiannon propped up her weak body and turned to look at Ethan, who stood fixed at the doorway, refusing to take another step. A strange sense of calm settled over her. "No need to force me. I'll eat it myself," she said, reaching for the food from the servants. But the two servants stepped back, avoiding her hand. Ethan's icy voice rang out again. "Decided you'll eat now. Too late, force-feed her. The male servant immediately stepped forward and brutally pinched Rhiannon's chin, while the female servant poured the hot congee into her mouth. The congee was scalding, burning her tongue. Rhiannon struggled, pushing the two servants away and spitting out the searing liquid. She turned her glare on Ethan. "Ethan, I said I would eat it myself if you push me any further. I'll burn down your villa," Cecilia, standing nearby, chimed in with feigned sincerity. "Ethan, darling, don't force her. Let's spare her some dignity in front of the servants," Rhiannon sneered. Cecilia's ability to switch faces was truly masterful. Ethan snorted coldly. "For Cece's sake, I'll spare you this time, Rhiannon. You'd better behave yourself in this house from now on. Don't try any tricks next time. I won't be so merciful." Rhiannon swallowed the ache in her heart and looked away. Ethan indifferently withdrew his gaze and turned away with Cecilia. "Since you enjoy staying in your room so much, you can have your dinner in here as well." With that parting shot, Ethan left. Rhiannon's body went limp. She looked at the mess of congee on the floor, a bitter smile touching her lips. This house was truly a hell, making her life a living death. Not long after, a servant did indeed bring dinner to her room. There was a variety of dishes, but despite being starved, Rhiannon had little appetite. She ate only half a bowl of rice before asking the servant to take everything away. She had been sleeping for the past 2 days, so as night fell, she found herself wide awake. After a while of boringly sitting in her room, she couldn't resist taking out her phone to secretly call her daughter, Daisy, who was abroad. But she had forgotten about the time difference. At this hour, it was already late at night over there. The person who answered the phone was Luke Langley. Luke told her that Daisy was already asleep. Rhiannon forced a smile, annoyed with herself. "I completely forgot about the time difference." Luke smiled gently, his voice soft. "Are you doing okay over there?" 5 years ago, when Rhiannon had gotten pregnant and gone abroad, Luke had been the one to take care of her, treating her with the tenderness of a dear brother. Rhiannon was incredibly grateful to him, and when she spoke to him, her voice naturally softened. "Everything's fine, Luke, my dear. You don't need to worry about me." They talked for a while longer, and then Luke suddenly said, "Daisy's awake. Do you want to say a few words to her?" "Yes, of course," Rhiannon immediately agreed. "Mommy," Daisy's sweet voice came through, cooing in a childlike tone. "Mommy, when are you coming back? Daisy misses you so much." Rhiannon's heart melted. "Be a good girl, Daisy. Mommy will be back in a few days," she cooed back. As she was speaking, the bedroom door was suddenly kicked open from the outside. Ethan, his face a dark, cold mask, strode into the room. Rhiannon's heart leaped in her chest. Guilt-ridden, she immediately hung up the phone. Ethan still didn't know she had secretly given birth to his daughter abroad. "Rhiannon, you have a child?" Ethan closed the distance in a few steps, pinning her against the wall. His dark, sunken eyes were filled with an icy chill. This woman, who had once sworn she would marry no one but him, had chosen to run off with Luke Langley 5 years ago while he was kidnapped and on the brink of death. She had abandoned their love, and him along with it. Not only that, before she left, she had hit Cecilia with her car, leaving her disfigured and with a broken leg. And now, after running away with Luke, she even had a child with him. Chapter 9, the rage of betrayal burned in Ethan's chest. He gripped Rhiannon's neck, his eyes filled with such malice it seemed he might actually strangle the pale, haggard woman right then and there. "You had a child with Luke Langley," he gritted out every word. Rhiannon pressed her lips together, striving to look at him with composure as she lied. "Yes, we have a child. I was already pregnant with his baby before I left the country." Ethan froze for a split second, then his fingers tightened viciously around her slender, pale neck. "No wonder you were in such a hurry to leave back then." She didn't even care that he had been kidnapped, that his life was in danger. Because she was afraid her affair and pregnancy would be exposed, she had betrayed him long ago. All that talk of undying love, of marrying no one but him, it was all lies. This floozy had been playing with his emotions from the very beginning. "Rhiannon, I should have killed you long ago," Ethan snarled, his fingers tightening further. The intense pressure made Rhiannon's face turn red and her head swam, but she didn't struggle. Instead, a grim smile spread across her face. "Yes, I should have died long ago. Go on, Ethan, be quick about it. If you have the guts, kill me now, save me from the disgusting task of having to bear your child." "Rhiannon, don't you dare think I won't." Ethan's fingers dug in, pressing her hard against the wall. His expression was ferocious. It was clear he was seriously considering murder. Rhiannon tilted her chin up, her watery eyes looking at him calmly. It was as if she didn't care at all whether she lived or died. The more she acted this way, the more enraged Ethan became, his fingers tightening relentlessly. The prolonged lack of air began to turn Rhiannon's face blue. Ethan looked down at her pained, dying expression, and in the end, his heart softened. He couldn't help but loosen his grip. Finally able to breathe, Rhiannon gasped for air, her knees giving way as she slid down the wall to the floor. Ethan took a step back, his gaze cold and desolate as he stared at the woman who had just escaped death. "Rhiannon, I won't let you off that easily. If I kill you, where would I find another woman to bear my child for free? I'm not just going to use you as my birthing tool, I'm going to torture you for the rest of your life. You will never escape me." Rhiannon managed a faint, tragic smile, her lashes lowered as she remained silent. What a pity. She didn't have much time left to live. Ethan's expectations were likely to be dashed. After he finished speaking, Ethan left her and slammed the door behind him, leaving Rhiannon alone, curled up, hugging her knees, completely drained of strength. So, Ethan finally knew about Daisy. She had to speed up her plans to leave. She couldn't stay here any longer. She had left 5 years ago because of threats from Cecilia and Yvette. They had orchestrated the kidnapping to force her away. It was either she left, or Ethan would be blinded. Of course, Rhiannon had to choose to leave. She never got the chance to tell him she was pregnant, and it was a good thing she left. If Ethan knew about her incurable, hereditary disease, he would have been heartbroken. Her days were numbered, but Ethan had a long life ahead of him. It was best that Ethan never knew the truth about the past. It was better for him to hate her and then forget her. That was what Rhiannon wanted. Her phone rang again. Rhiannon picked it up. It was Luke. "Luke, my dear," Rhiannon sniffled, trying to sound cheerful, but Luke sighed softly. "Rhiannon, I heard your conversation with Ethan just now." Rhiannon stiffened, her gaze falling. "Are you being held captive by Ethan now?" Luke asked with concern. Seeing that she could no longer hide it, Rhiannon admitted it, but she didn't mention that Ethan was forcing her to have a child. Upon hearing this, Luke's voice was gentle yet firm. "I'm coming back to the country to get you. You can't escape Ethan's control on your own. I'll come back and help you." Chapter 10. After Ethan slammed the door and left that night, a long time passed without his return. But Cecilia didn't let Rhiannon rest, finding new ways to torment her every day. Rhiannon had no desire to argue with her, so most of the time, she simply ignored Cecilia. Even when Cecilia became so enraged that she locked Rhiannon in her room without food or water, Rhiannon refused to even look at her. Arguing with Cecilia was a complete waste of her time. Cecilia was always pushed to her breaking point, but she didn't dare get physical with Rhiannon in the Crawford estate, afraid that if Ethan suddenly returned and caught her, her facade of pure innocence would shatter instantly. But she couldn't just swallow her anger, so she called Yvette over. Mother and daughter teamed up, determined to teach Rhiannon a lesson. Rhiannon wanted peace, so she spent most of her time in her room. Her health had been particularly poor these last few days. Her nose would bleed at the slightest provocation, she was dizzy, and felt weak all over. To make matters worse, Cecilia had thrown away her suitcase, meaning all her medication was gone. Her health was failing, and she couldn't even take her medicine. Rhiannon's situation was as dire as it could be. All she wanted now was to rest and recuperate. As soon as she felt a little better, she would escape from this nightmarish Crawford estate. However, Rhiannon hadn't had more than a few hours of quiet before her bedroom door was once again violently thrown open. Yvette pushed Cecilia's wheelchair into the room, their expressions hostile. Behind them followed 2 sturdy, middle-aged women. One of them held a bowl of medicinal soup, the bitter aroma filling the room, sharp and pungent. Rhiannon sat up, on guard, her face cold. "What do you want now?" Yvette smirked sinisterly. "Aren't you supposed to be bearing a child for Ethan in our Ceci's place? I went to great lengths to consult a traditional medicine doctor and got you a prescription to nourish your body and help you get pregnant faster." As she spoke, she gestured for one of the women to bring the bowl over, her eyes fixed on Rhiannon with a cold glare. "You should drink it while it's hot. It won't be as effective if it gets cold." Rhiannon looked at the dark, murky liquid and frowned. "I really appreciate the thought, but I don't need it. Please leave, I need to rest." Yvette sneered. Such a kind offer, how can you refuse? I'm only doing this for your own good. Rhiannon didn't believe for a second that this concoction was anything good for her body. Cecilia and Yvette were vicious characters who would love nothing more than to see her torn to pieces. They would never be kind to her. I said, I don't need it. Stop wasting your breath on this wretch, Cecilia said impatiently. Just pour it down her throat. The two middle-aged women immediately stepped forward. One held Rhiannon down while the other pinched her cheeks and poured the bitter, thick liquid into her mouth. Rhiannon struggled desperately. The moment the medicine entered her mouth, she spat it out, not swallowing a single drop. Yvette frowned in displeasure, her tone venomous. Go get the whole pot from the kitchen and pour it all down her throat. I don't believe this wretch can refuse to drink it. Yes, ma'am. One of the women immediately went downstairs and quickly returned with a whole pot of the dark, thick herbal medicine. Rhiannon's body was already weak, making her no match for the two strong women. In the end, they managed to force a stomachful of the medicine down her throat. Half of the medicine spilled onto the bedsheets and her clothes, leaving the room in a complete mess. After the last drop was forced down, the two women finally let go. Rhiannon collapsed, weakly kneeling on the carpet. Her mouth was filled with bitterness, and her stomach churned uncomfortably. She gasped for breath, dry heaving. Cecilia watched Rhiannon's wretched state with smug satisfaction. Now, go give her a bath. Clean her up. A sense of alarm rose in Rhiannon. She frowned and glared at Cecilia. What other tricks are you planning? Cecilia's lips curved into a cruel, vicious smile. Aren't you trying to conceive? Of course, we need to take you for a physical examination. What if your constitution is poor and you can't get pregnant? We need to arrange for a doctor to treat you, don't we? With a wave of her hand, the two middle-aged women hoisted Rhiannon up and once again dragged her into the bathroom. Chapter 11, Rhiannon was forced into the bathtub by the two maids, who began to wash her against her will. She refused to submit, struggling with all her might. But strangely, the more she moved, the dizzier she became. Her vision blurred and spun, as if she were drunk. Eventually, her body ached so much that she lost all strength to resist. She could only let the two women change her into a fresh set of clothes, then drag her limp form downstairs and shove her into a van. The van swayed and lurched, making her head spin even more. She almost passed out. She had to bite her lower lip, hard, using the pain to force herself to stay lucid. After what felt like an eternity, the van finally stopped. The door was pulled open, and two men lifted Rhiannon out. Through her blurry, spinning vision, she vaguely made out the word hospital before she was moved onto a gurney, wheeled into an elevator, and finally dumped onto a single bed in a private room. The two men who brought her in left, and the room fell silent. Rhiannon struggled to prop herself up, wanting to get off the bed. But as she swung one leg over the side, her weak body gave way, and she tumbled from the bed, her knees crashing onto the hard floor. The pain in her knees, however, brought a strange sense of clarity. She gritted her teeth and began to crawl slowly, painstakingly, toward the door. Click, the door to the room swung open. A male doctor with an unpleasant face walked in. When his eyes landed on Rhiannon, they immediately lit up. What a beauty, he said, walking closer. He hastily pulled Rhiannon up from the floor, pushed her onto the bed, and let his eyes scan her slender, well-proportioned body. He licked his lips in admiration. And what a figure! This deal is a real jackpot. As he spoke, he reached out to unbutton her blouse. Rhiannon struggled weakly, but her feeble resistance was like a kitten's scratch, easily brushed aside by the doctor. Get away! Don't touch me! Rhiannon had no strength to push him away, so she could only offer a pale, verbal threat. If you dare touch me, I guarantee Ethan Crawford will have you killed by tomorrow. The doctor paid her no mind. As he unbuttoned her shirt, he chuckled. I'm just giving you a routine physical examination. Don't be scared. I promise you'll enjoy it. Her shirt fell open, and the cool air sent goosebumps across her skin. A wave of nausea churned in her stomach, the feeling growing stronger and stronger until she couldn't hold it back any longer. With a retch, she threw up. The undigested black medicine splattered all over the bed, even staining the doctor's clothes. You wretch! He cursed angrily, shoving her away and disgustedly brushing the black filth off his clothes. Rhiannon weakly propped herself up, wiped her mouth, and glared at him with cold eyes. Don't touch me or next time, I'll vomit right in your face. The doctor took off his soiled coat, his face darkening. You harlot, you're asking for it, aren't you? He strode forward, brutally grabbing her hair and dragging her from the soiled bed to a nearby armchair. As he cursed, he reached down to pull off her pants. If someone hadn't paid me to sleep with you, I wouldn't be interested in a woman who's been with God knows how many men. Rhiannon tried desperately to keep her legs together, but her weakened body was no match for him. He easily pried them apart. He fumbled with the button on her pants while pressing his lips to her neck and collarbone. Rhiannon trembled with disgust and revulsion, yet she was powerless, without even the strength to scream for help. She tilted her head back, staring hopelessly at the ceiling, silent tears streaming down her face as she bit her lip. Now, more than ever, she just wanted to die. Every day she was alive was just more pain. The button on her pants came undone. The doctor was about to strip her completely. Rhiannon closed her eyes in agony, her heart dead. But at that very moment, bang, the door to the private room was kicked open with tremendous force. Chapter 12, Rhiannon's eyes flew open, her gaze snapping to the doorway. Who was it? Had someone come to save her? The figure silhouetted in the doorway was terrifyingly familiar. It was Ethan. His expression was dark and horrifying, his glare fixed on Rhiannon with something close to malice. Rhiannon, I've only been gone a few days, and you're already so desperate you're seducing doctors in a hospital. He stood just inside the door, his eyes cold and menacing as he stared down at the disheveled woman on the armchair. Rhiannon stared, stunned. In his eyes, this situation looked like she was the one doing the seducing. The doctor, seeing Ethan, scrambled off Rhiannon, a sycophantic smile plastered on his face. I'm so sorry, I didn't realize this lady had a boyfriend. She told me she was single and kept coming on to me, so I just lost my head for a moment. Rhiannon's eyes remained fixed on Ethan, her voice hoarse and weak. Ethan, do you really believe that I was seducing him, and not that he was trying to assault me? Ethan let out a cold, mocking laugh, his eyes locked on hers as he spoke slowly, enunciating each word. If he were really forcing himself on you, why didn't you struggle? I was right outside the door and didn't hear you scream for help once. Rhiannon, you're just a harlot, just like back then, when she cheated on him with Luke Langley and even had a child with him. This woman was a complete and utter liar. Rhiannon's heart ached with a sharp, bitter pain, yet a strange smile touched her lips. You're right, I am a harlot, so if you have any decency, let me go. Don't make me bear your child and taint the Crawford bloodline. Her words were clear, but due to her weakness, they came out slow and soft, almost nonchalant. Ethan's hands, hanging at his sides, clenched into tight fists. She was that unwilling to be with him? She could have a child for Luke Langley, but when it came to him, Ethan Crawford, she refused. Ethan closed the distance in 2 steps, his expression frigid, his aura chillingly cold. The doctor at his side shuddered, hastily mumbling, "You two talk, I won't disturb you," before quickly slipping out of the room. In an instant, only the scantily clad Rhiannon on the armchair and the ice-cold Ethan remained. You want to leave? Ethan stood over her, his eyes looking down on her with cold disdain. You want to go abroad to find Luke Langley and that little bastard you had with him? Rhiannon's hand tightened into a fist, her brows furrowing. Ethan, I won't let you call my child a bastard. Ethan leaned down, grabbing her chin. She is a bastard, he hissed. Rhiannon, were we broken up when you slept with Luke Langley? You cheated on me, you got pregnant, what is that child you had if not a love child? She's a wretch, just like you. Slap Rhiannon's hand struck Ethan's face, snapping his handsome head to the side. Ethan, I will not let you insult my daughter. Even though her whole body was in pain, Rhiannon repeated her words with force. Ethan turned his head back, his eyes terrifyingly cold, as if he could devour her whole. The fingers gripping her chin tightened, leaving pale marks on her white skin. Rhiannon, you really are protective of the child you had with Luke Langley. Since you love her so much, let me make things crystal clear. Ethan stared into her eyes, his voice harsh. If you don't obediently bear my child, I'll find that daughter of yours and have her thrown into the ocean to drown. Rhiannon's heart skipped a beat, a flash of panic she couldn't hide crossing her eyes. But she quickly regained her composure. No, you'll never find her. Luke had hidden Daisy well. It was impossible for Ethan to find her. A cold smile touched Ethan's lips, as merciless as a demon from hell. What do you think I've been doing these past few days? he said, forcefully tilting her pale face up, forcing her to look at him more closely. I went abroad myself and found that little love child you've been hiding. Chapter 13. Rhiannon's body tensed, her eyes widening in disbelief. What? How could Ethan have possibly found Daisy? He had never met Daisy, so he wouldn't know what she looked like. And besides, Luke would never have let him find her. You're lying, you couldn't have found Daisy? Rhiannon shook her head, refusing to believe it. Impossible, a cold smirk played on Ethan's lips. You don't believe me? Rhiannon shook her head firmly. I don't believe you, she trusted Luke. It was impossible for Ethan to have found her daughter just like that. Ethan nodded, then grabbed her wrist and pulled her forcefully toward the door. The sudden movement almost made Rhiannon trip. She hastily used her free hand to clutch her clothes, stumbling to keep up with his long strides. Just as they left the room, they saw Cecilia emerging from a doctor's office, her expression one of shock. Ethan, darling, what's going on with you too? Ethan slowed for a moment, frowning. What are you doing at the hospital? Are you not feeling well? Cecilia rubbed the legs resting on her wheelchair. My legs were hurting, so I came to get them checked. What's wrong with you and sis? Oh my, sis, why are your clothes in such a state? She covered her mouth in feigned shock. Rhiannon sneered. What's wrong with me? Don't you know perfectly well? Cecilia raised an eyebrow, her expression innocent. Sis, what do you mean? Rhiannon was sick of her hypocritical act. Stop acting, wasn't this whole thing arranged by you? Rhiannon, it was Ethan who exploded first. He tightened his grip on her wrist. Shut up, don't blame your own mistakes on Ceci. You've already made her suffer enough. A lump formed in Rhiannon's throat, and her heart constricted painfully, her eyes turning red. She fought back tears, meeting Ethan's cold, grim face with a composed expression. Ethan shot her a harsh, warning glare before turning to Cecilia, his expression softening instantly. If you're not feeling well, see the doctor and then go home and rest. He then turned back to Rhiannon, his gaze sharp and severe. I have something I need to take care of. With that, he pulled Rhiannon along, continuing toward the exit. But Cecilia pushed her wheelchair to follow. Ethan, darling, what's going on? Did you and sis have some kind of misunderstanding? Her face was full of concern and anxiety as she followed them. Ethan didn't answer, silently quickening his pace as he dragged Rhiannon down the stairs. But just then, a loud crash echoed from behind them. Cecilia had fallen. She had tumbled out of her wheelchair, rolling down several steps. The wheelchair lay overturned beside her, its wheels still spinning. Cess! Ethan instantly let go of Rhiannon and rushed to Cecilia's side, anxiously lifting her into his arms. Are you okay? Did you hurt yourself? The man's handsome face was filled with tension and concern. Rhiannon stood frozen nearby, watching his care for Cecilia and thinking of the coldness he showed her. Another sharp pain pierced her heart. I'm fine, Cecilia forced a smile, her voice kind and considerate. Ethan, darling, don't be so worried, I'm okay. But Ethan still scooped her up, intending to carry her to the nearest doctor's office. I'm taking you for a checkup. After a few steps, he turned back and issued a cold warning to the rigid Rhiannon. Rhiannon, you stay right here. If you dare leave without permission, don't blame me for what I do to that love child of yours. After the warning, he strode away, carrying Cecilia, and quickly disappeared into a hospital room. Rhiannon watched his retreating back, and her body suddenly lost all its strength. She collapsed onto the floor. A warmth filled her nose. She was bleeding again. Rhiannon pressed a hand to her nose, but the warm blood continued to seep through her fingers, dripping onto the floor in alarming red drops. Oh my, what's wrong with you? A passing female nurse noticed and rushed over, helping Rhiannon up. Let me take you to get that treated. Rhiannon shook her head, wanting to say she was fine, but her body was too weak. Before she could say a word, she fainted. Chapter 14. Rhiannon's blackout was brief. She regained consciousness quickly. She found herself lying on a hospital bed with an IV drip in the back of her hand. The kind nurse who had helped her was adjusting the drip rate. Seeing her awake, the nurse offered a smile. Rhiannon returned a grateful smile. Thank you for helping me, but I have something to do. I have to leave. She struggled to sit up. The nurse quickly pressed her shoulder down. Do you know what's wrong with you? She said seriously. Your nosebleeds are severe. It could very well be leukemia. I strongly suggest you get a detailed examination immediately. Rhiannon shook her head, her smile bitter. I know. It wasn't just leukemia, it was a hereditary, malignant form of it. Even with a bone marrow transplant, there was a 60% chance of relapse. 5 years ago, the leukemia in her genes had flared up. It was right around the time she found out she was pregnant. The doctor had told her that, because of this hereditary disease, it was best to terminate the pregnancy. Otherwise, the child would have a high chance of inheriting the same illness. Rhiannon had been lost and confused. She had wanted to call Ethan to discuss it, but just then, news of his kidnapping had arrived. Cecilia had given her a choice: leave or Ethan dies. What choice did Rhiannon have but to leave? Besides, her malignant leukemia would kill her sooner or later. Rather than let Ethan watch her be tortured to death by the disease, it was better to just leave. So Rhiannon had left without hesitation, driving straight to the airport. But she never expected that on the way, Cecilia's car would collide head-on with hers. It was only then that she realized Cecilia's demand for her to leave was just a ruse. Her real goal was to see Rhiannon dead. Such a vicious plot. But miraculously, Rhiannon was unharmed in the crash. Cecilia, on the other hand, got what she deserved. Her face was disfigured and her leg was broken. After that, Luke Langley found Rhiannon and took her abroad. Luke persuaded her to have the child, to try for a bone marrow match and gamble on a cure for herself. Besides, there was no guarantee the child would inherit the malignant leukemia. To end the child's life so abruptly was too cruel. Rhiannon was convinced. She gave birth abroad, and the bone marrow was a successful match. But the outcome was merciless. Her leukemia relapsed in the second year after her treatment. It returned with a vengeance. The doctors told her that even with the best medical care, she wouldn't live for more than 3 years. She had returned to the country now because she wanted to see the place where she grew up one last time before she died. What she hadn't expected was to be caught by Ethan right after she got off the plane, before she even left the airport. What followed was Ethan's cruel and relentless torment. He was convinced that Rhiannon was a wretch who had betrayed their love and run off with Luke Langley. Rhiannon didn't want to explain, so she let the misunderstanding continue. What she hadn't anticipated was that Ethan had found Daisy. The thought made her heart clench in fear. She couldn't drag the innocent Daisy into this. She had to call Luke right now to make sure Daisy was safe. She had been dragged out of her apartment by Cecilia without her phone, so she needed to get back as soon as possible. Pulling the IV needle from her hand, Rhiannon ignored the nurse's protests and tried to leave, her steps unsteady. When she pulled open the door of the hospital room, Ethan's dark, terrifying face appeared right in front of her. The shock made her legs give way, and she collapsed onto the floor. Ethan stepped closer, looming over her, his eyes sinister. "Rhiannon, didn't I warn you to stay put and wait for me?" Rhiannon's lips parted, but the words of explanation never came. She couldn't just tell Ethan that she had moved because she had fainted from her illness. Even if not explaining would lead to more severe consequences, she couldn't tell him the truth. Chapter 15, Rhiannon's silence, as expected, ignited an even more violent rage in Ethan. He grabbed her wrist, brutally yanking her up from the floor and dragging her outside. The nurse from before rushed forward to intervene. "Sir, what are you doing?" she said, blocking his path and scolding him with a frown. "Don't you know she's C? I'm fine," Rhiannon quickly cut the nurse off. "Thank you, but I'm really fine." Ethan shot a cold glance at the nurse and continued to forcefully drag Rhiannon out of the hospital. He shoved her into the car. Before she could even steady herself, he floored the accelerator. The engine roared, and the car shot forward. Rhiannon turned to stare out the window, forcing down the waves of discomfort rising within her. The car sped to a small villa on the outskirts of the city. Ethan got out first and walked into the villa without a word. Rhiannon hesitated for a moment, then followed him with a mix of disbelief and hope. Deep down, a part of her still prayed that Ethan hadn't really found Daisy. As she approached the garden, the soft, milky sound of a child's voice reached her ears. Rhiannon's mind went blank. Without waiting for Ethan to say anything, she rushed toward the sound. Her daughter, her Daisy, was really here. She was by the poolside, playing with dolls with a young maid. Daisy? Rhiannon's mind was a void, her heart pounding erratically in her chest. Hearing her name, Daisy looked up, a bright smile spreading across her small face. "Mommy!" She dropped her doll and ran toward Rhiannon on her little legs. Rhiannon knelt, her arms open to catch her, but Ethan was faster. He stepped in front of Rhiannon and swept Daisy into his arms. Rhiannon's heart clenched and her expression darkened. "Ethan, give Daisy back to me." Ethan's face was as cold as ice, like a demon devoid of all humanity and emotion. He looked at Rhiannon with chilling indifference. "Rhiannon, you ignored my warning. Tell me, how should I punish Daisy now?" Daisy listened, confused, blinking her large, grape-like eyes. She looked at Rhiannon and called out softly again, "Mommy." "Ethan, whatever you have a problem with, take it out on me. Don't hurt my daughter," Rhiannon pleaded desperately. A smile touched Ethan's lips, his eyes dark and sinister. "Rhiannon, you really do care about the child you had with Luke Langley, don't you?" Rhiannon clenched her fists, her heart aching with a bitter pain. "Ethan, no matter what, the child is innocent. I'm begging you, don't hurt Daisy. She has nothing to do with what's between us." Daisy didn't understand what was happening, but the tension between the adults made her sense the danger. She suddenly burst into tears, struggling in Ethan's arms, trying to reach for Rhiannon. "Mommy, mommy, hold me." Her cries tore at Rhiannon's heart. Her eyes reddened, and she couldn't stop the tears from falling. "It's okay, Daisy, mommy's coming." She took small steps toward her daughter. Ethan narrowed his eyes and took a few steps back, holding Daisy. He stood at the edge of the pool, holding Daisy up by the back of her collar, dangling the small child precariously over the rippling water. If he loosened his grip even slightly, Daisy would fall into the pool. Ethan's voice was harsh. "Rhiannon, do you believe me when I say I'll throw this little bastard in right now?" As he spoke, he loosened one of the fingers holding her collar. Daisy's body swayed dangerously in the air, about to fall. Although the pool was only 4 feet deep, Daisy was only 4 years old, not even 3 feet tall. If she fell in, she would drown. "No, Ethan," Rhiannon's heart seized in agony. She sniffled, her eyes red as she screamed, "Please, I'm begging you, don't hurt Daisy." "She's your child," she thought. "How can you be so cruel?" However, Ethan was deaf to her pleas. He stood there, expressionless, loosening his grip finger by finger until he let go completely. "Ah, Daisy." Author's note: thank you, my little princesses, for reading this far. You can read the entire book for the price of a drink. I hope everyone will support it. The author works hard writing late into the night, so I really need everyone's support. Every subscription is the motivation that keeps me writing. The author's meal money depends on all of you, moi. The next chapter is very exciting, don't miss it. Important: this book is complete, so please read with confidence. Chapter 16. Rhiannon's eyes widened, her heart shattering. She covered her mouth, her knees giving way as she sank to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. "Ethan, I'm begging you, please don't." Seeing her on the verge of collapse, Ethan was finally satisfied. Just as Daisy was about to plunge into the pool, he deftly caught her by the ankle, leaving her dangling upside down over the water. Ethan narrowed his eyes, his voice cold. "Rhiannon, I'll say this one last time. From now on, you will obey my every word. Otherwise, next time, even if you get on your knees and beg, I won't show you an ounce of mercy." Rhiannon wiped away her tears and looked at the wailing Daisy. She had no choice but to nod in agreement. "Did you hear me, Rhiannon?" But Ethan wasn't satisfied with just a nod. He wanted her verbal promise. "I heard you." Rhiannon squeezed her eyes shut. "I promise, I'll be obedient from now on." Only then did Ethan pull Daisy away from the dangerous edge of the pool. Rhiannon immediately rushed forward, wanting to hold her crying child, but Ethan's cold voice stopped her. "Did I say you could come over here?" Rhiannon froze, her steps halting. She tried to soothe her daughter from a distance. "Daisy, don't cry, mommy's right here." Ethan handed the child to a nearby maid and then said to Rhiannon, "Now, get in the car." Rhiannon looked at Daisy with tear-filled eyes and pleaded with Ethan, "Let me hold her first. She's still crying." "Rhiannon, I told you to get in the car," Ethan commanded coldly. Rhiannon bit her lip. She was terrified that if she disobeyed, this demon would find another way to torture Daisy. She had to obey. She turned to walk away. "Mommy," Daisy's cries intensified. She reached out for Rhiannon, wailing, "Mommy, don't go, hold Daisy, mommy." Rhiannon's heart felt like it was being torn apart. She couldn't take another step. She turned back, grabbing Ethan's arm and casting aside all her dignity. "Ethan, I'm begging you, let me hold my child. I'll agree to anything you want. Just let me hold her." Ethan looked down, his eyes dark and inscrutable, as if devoid of all emotion. "Fine." "Serve me," he said, gripping her chin and forcing her pale, clean face up. "If you satisfy me, I'll let you hold her." Rhiannon gritted her teeth. "Fine, I'll serve you." Ethan led her into the villa and pushed open a bedroom door. "Take it off," he said, sitting down on the sofa. His posture was relaxed and elegant, but his eyes were fierce, fixed on her. Rhiannon swallowed her humiliation and shame, unbuttoning her blouse one button at a time. She stripped off all her clothes, standing exposed and vulnerable under the light. "Come here," Ethan beckoned, his voice already growing husky. Rhiannon closed her eyes and slowly walked toward him. Her wrist was seized by his hot hand, and her body was pressed into the soft sofa. Rhiannon turned her head away, obediently opening herself to him. They were entangled for half the day. Rhiannon, already weak, was pushed to her limit and fainted. When she awoke, it was the middle of the night. Ethan was gone. A young maid was keeping watch by the bed. Seeing Rhiannon awake, she quickly approached and asked respectfully, "Miss Somers, would you like something to eat?" Rhiannon was indeed hungry, but she had no mind for food. She propped herself up and asked, "Where's Daisy?" The maid answered softly, "Daisy is already asleep." Rhiannon threw back the covers and got out of bed. "I need to see her," she said urgently. The maid didn't stop her, following behind and leading her down the hallway to a bedroom at the far end. "Daisy is in here." "Thank you," Rhiannon said, then gently pushed open the door. A soft, dim nightlight was on in the room. Daisy was curled up on the pink single bed. Rhiannon tiptoed to the bedside, sat down, and leaned over to check on her daughter. Half of Daisy's head was buried in the soft covers. Her cheeks were rosy, and she was sleeping soundly. It seemed Ethan hadn't been tormenting her in the villa. He was just using her as a pawn to control Rhiannon. Rhiannon stayed by Daisy's side, watching her sleeping face, for what felt like half an hour. The maid knocked softly on the door. "The young master has given orders. You can only stay with Daisy for 30 minutes. If you go over, you'll have to face the consequences." Rhiannon's fingers tightened. Reluctantly, she left Daisy's room. "The driver is waiting for you at the door to take you home," the maid added. "Yes, I know," Rhiannon nodded, taking one last look back before leaving the villa. Before getting into the car, she couldn't help but ask the maid, "Please take good care of Daisy. I'll be forever grateful to you." The maid smiled. "Don't worry. The young master has already instructed that Daisy's daily needs are to be attended to with the utmost care. So, as long as you obey the young master, Daisy will be fine." A bitter pang shot through Rhiannon's heart. As long as she obeyed, Ethan truly had her by her most fatal weakness. Chapter 17, 2 months later, Rhiannon was pregnant. She was terrified the baby would inherit her leukemia. She tried to find a way to terminate the pregnancy, but Ethan locked her away. As her belly grew day by day, Rhiannon's face grew gaunt and pale. Fearing for the health of the child, Ethan sent Daisy to stay with her. But this did little to quell the growing panic in her heart. When Rhiannon was 7 months pregnant, Cecilia came to see her. "You wretch," was the first thing Cecilia said, her eyes fixed on Rhiannon's large belly. The venom in her gaze seemed tangible enough to burn a hole right through it. Rhiannon cradled her belly, warily guarding against her. The baby was so far along, she couldn't let anything happen. But Cecilia lunged, slapping her across the face. Rhiannon couldn't dodge in time. A red handprint quickly bloomed on her cheek. The force of the slap snapped her head to the side. "Cecilia, don't push me too far," she warned in a low voice. Cecilia, seated before her, let out a mocking laugh. "So what if I push you? I'll hit you again." She raised her hand to strike again, but Rhiannon caught her wrist. Immediately, the 2 bodyguards Cecilia had brought with her pulled Rhiannon away, forcing her to her knees. A sharp pain shot through her stomach. She cried out, refusing to kneel, but one of the bodyguards kicked her in the back of the knee, making her collapse to the floor. "Ugh!" She curled up, carefully protecting her stomach. If it weren't for this child, she wouldn't be in such a wretched state. "Ah, Mommy, you bad people," Daisy cried out as she came out of her room and saw the scene. She burst into tears and lunged at the bodyguards, kicking and biting them, but they simply picked her up like a little chick and tossed her aside. "Daisy," Rhiannon shrieked, watching in horror as Daisy slid down the wall and lost consciousness. "Cecilia," she turned her head, her eyes blazing with hatred as she stared at Cecilia, who was smiling maliciously at her. "You'd better not touch her, or I swear, this isn't over," Cecilia laughed mockingly and gestured for the bodyguards to pick up the unconscious Daisy, swinging her back and forth like a toy. What do you mean touch her? Like this? Or like this? Watching Daisy being swung around, Rhiannon's eyes were filled with fury. With a sudden burst of strength, she pushed one of the bodyguards away and snatched Daisy from his grasp. Just as she feared, blood was trickling from the child's nose. She carefully wiped it with her sleeve, her heart filled with a mixture of anger and panic. She turned her glare on Cecilia. "Cecilia, don't think I'm afraid of you. I'm carrying Ethan's child. If anything happens, you won't be able to talk your way out of it, even if you had 1,000 mouths." Cecilia's venomous gaze fixed on her large belly, her eyes burning with jealousy. Damn it, she had been engaged to Ethan for so long, and he had never even touched her. Not only that, he was making Rhiannon have his child. Why? Why did Rhiannon get everything good? Why, after she had betrayed him, was he still so obsessed with her, while Cecilia, despite all her schemes, couldn't get even a sliver of his love? At this thought, she ordered the 2 bodyguards to grab Rhiannon's wrists. "Heh, are you sure it's Ethan's child? For all we know, it's another love child you had with some other man. I'll just help Ethan clean house." "No, what are you doing?" The bodyguards pinned Rhiannon's arms. She watched in horror as Cecilia approached with a pair of scissors. She tried desperately to back away, but she was held fast. "I'm telling you, Ethan is on his way back. When he sees you've killed his child, he'll go crazy." "No, please don't. I'll do anything you want." The sharp scissors swung toward her stomach. She shut her eyes in terror. At that moment, the sound of a door opening came from the entryway, followed by the heavy clatter of scissors hitting the floor and Cecilia's sharp scream. "Sis, why are you doing this to me?" Her accusatory, wronged voice echoed in her ear. Rhiannon opened her eyes to see the scissors that should have been stabbing her belly lying on the floor, stained with blood. Cecilia was sitting opposite her, clutching a bleeding arm and looking pitifully at Ethan. Rhiannon raised her tear-streaked face. Ethan unbuttoned his suit jacket, his face ashen. Rhiannon closed her eyes, gently stroking her unharmed belly. As long as the baby was safe, that was all that mattered. As for Ethan, he could misunderstand all he wanted. It wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. "I asked you a question." The next second, Ethan's hand was on her chin, forcing her to look up. Rhiannon opened her eyes. "What do you want me to say? When have you ever listened to a word I've said?" Ethan froze, his grip on her chin loosening slightly. His expression was a little unnatural as he asked, "Is the baby okay?" A tragic smile touched Rhiannon's lips. The only connection between them was this child. Just then, Cecilia, clutching her bleeding arm, sidled up to Ethan and tugged on his sleeve. "Ethan, darling, don't blame Sis," she said pitifully. "She's probably just been a little emotional lately. I'm fine." As she said she was fine, she let out a soft hiss, as if to make sure the whole world saw her injured arm. Ethan's brow twitched, and he turned, his entire body radiating a terrifying aura. "What are you doing here?" he asked Cecilia, frowning. Cecilia paused, surprised that Ethan's first concern wasn't her injury, but why she was there. A surge of anger rose in her, but her smile only grew sweeter. She looked up, her expression a mix of panic and confusion. "I thought Sis would be bored all alone here, so I came to keep her company." I didn't expect that just a few words in, she would grab the scissors from the table. She left her sentence hanging. It was a tactic that had always worked before. Ethan would assume she was too kind to blame Rhiannon and would take his anger out on her instead. But this time, she was destined to be disappointed. Ethan surveyed the room, his gaze landing on the bodyguards who had been cowering in the corner since he arrived. He pointed at them. "You need 2 bodyguards to keep her company?" Cecilia froze, about to say something else, but Ethan cut her off. "Don't think I'm blind. Rhiannon is this far along. This is not the time for your games. Go home." In the past, he had turned a blind eye to Cecilia's actions out of his own overwhelming hatred for Rhiannon. Now, though the hatred remained, for the sake of the child, he couldn't let her be harmed any further. Ethan closed his eyes, telling himself it was only for the baby's sake. Cecilia tried one last time to salvage the situation, but Ethan waved his hand, signaling the bodyguards to take her away. Soon, only the 2 of them and the unconscious Daisy remained in the room. Chapter 18. Ethan paused, about to step forward and pick up the unconscious Daisy, but Rhiannon beat him to it. She tried to bend down, her large belly making it difficult. Watching her struggle, Ethan grew impatient, pulled her aside, and lifted Daisy himself. "I'm taking her to a doctor." Hearing the word doctor, Rhiannon instinctively blocked his path, her tone firm. "No need. She's just not feeling well. Give Daisy to me." Ethan looked at her with a complex expression for a long moment before snorting. "I'm not that despicable. I wouldn't harm a child." But Rhiannon insisted, demanding he give Daisy to her. Ethan, unable to win the argument, had no choice but to place Daisy on the bed in the bedroom. After Ethan left, Rhiannon secretly called Luke Langley, her voice trembling. "Luke, I need to ask you for a favor." After 7 long months, the first time Rhiannon called was to ask for his help. Yet Luke didn't have a single complaint, agreeing with a simple "okay" before she even finished speaking. In his study, Ethan felt a strange restlessness. The image of Daisy's unconscious face flashed in his mind, and an unprecedented panic gripped his heart, making it hard to breathe. He undid the top button of his shirt and opened the study door, just in time to see Rhiannon coming out of the bedroom. As if his heart had suddenly found its anchor, he lifted his chin and ordered imperiously, "Make dinner. I want a pan-seared steak." But this time, Rhiannon didn't obey. She walked past him, cradling her belly, and said lightly, "No." "What did you say?" Ethan grabbed her hand, his eyes narrowed. After trying and failing to shake him off, Rhiannon finally looked up and said calmly, "If you want to eat, make it yourself. I'm only responsible for giving you a child." Ethan's anger flared. He lowered his voice, a dangerous edge to his tone. "Rhiannon, don't think that just because I defended you once, you can push your luck." "I'm not," she replied calmly. "I'm not well. Taking care of Daisy is already exhausting. Unless you get someone else to help me." Ethan sneered. "Not well? Since when did you have so many problems?" Rhiannon's heart soured, but she had to lift her head and make her demand. "Have Luke Langley come and take care of me." Silence, a long, heavy silence. After what felt like an eternity, just as Rhiannon thought Ethan was about to beat her and lock her up, he slowly released her hand. His voice was terrifyingly low. "Rhiannon, are you trying to die?" Rhiannon's heart trembled, but she met his gaze without fear, enunciating each word. "I want Luke Langley to take care of me." Ethan's fingers twitched. He fought the urge to hit her and lock her away, instead saying coldly, "Impossible. I'd rather die than let Luke Langley set foot in my house." A brilliant smile spread across Rhiannon's face. The smile dazzled Ethan, but a sense of foreboding crept into his heart. "Rhiannon, what are you doing?" The words had barely left his mouth when Rhiannon pulled a pair of blood-stained scissors from behind her back and plunged them toward her own stomach. The scissors didn't find their mark. Rhiannon opened her trembling eyes to see Ethan's hand gripping the sharp blades, stopping them just an inch from her belly. Blood dripped from his hand onto the floor at her feet. Her heart trembled, but she pushed harder, trying to drive the scissors in. "Enough," Ethan roared, snatching the scissors and throwing them far away before slapping her across the face. A bloody handprint appeared on her beautiful face. Worried she might get a nosebleed, she turned her head away, not wanting him to see her illness. But Ethan thought she was so disgusted by him that she couldn't even bear to look at him. He began to tremble, demanding, "Rhiannon, what have I done to you that you would humiliate me like this? All those years we were together, I don't think I ever wronged you. But you left me without a word, ran off with another man, and had his child. Have you ever considered how I felt? And now you want to bring that man into our home for your little family of 3 to be reunited. My heart is made of flesh and blood too. If you had just thought about me for a second, you wouldn't." He turned away, unable to continue. Rhiannon's heart was in turmoil, waves of guilt washing over her. "But I'm sorry," she thought. "My time is running out. I'd rather you hate me than spend the rest of your long life alone. Ethan is a good man. He deserves a better woman to love him." Forcing down the blood rising in her throat, she turned her face, her expression equally indifferent. "You can't stop me, if not today then tomorrow. Unless you tie me up, but then the baby in my belly will starve." Ethan's back shook violently. After a long moment, he grabbed her chin, his red-rimmed eyes staring at her as he said, word by word, "I won't allow it. Even if you die, you'll die on my territory." Rhiannon closed her eyes, a single tear sliding down her cheek. Ethan froze, then gently wiped the tear from the corner of her eye with his thumb and pulled her into his arms. Just be good and have the baby, and maybe we can. He couldn't finish the sentence, only patting her on the shoulder. We'll talk after the baby is born. But Ethan was not destined to wait that long. The next day, when he came home, he found Rhiannon collapsed in the living room, an empty bottle of sleeping pills clutched in her hand. Rhiannon, Ethan's mind went blank. He trembled as he lifted her frail body and rushed to the hospital. Miss Somers is awake. The dosage of sleeping pills wasn't large, and it was discovered in time, so there's no major harm to the baby, the doctor said, then hesitated. He remembered the girl's tearful plea, and his heart softened. But in the end, he just sighed and didn't mention her other fatal illness. He simply patted Ethan on the shoulder and said, "Spend more time with her." Ethan seemed not to hear, walking straight to the hospital room. He saw Rhiannon struggling to sit up, her face still pale. The first thing she said when she saw him was, "I want to see Luke Langley." Chapter 19, Ethan hid his clenched fist behind his back, his entire body trembling slightly. His handsome face was frosted over. "Are you really going to force me like this?" he asked, his eyes devoid of any emotion. Rhiannon looked back at him, equally cold, and repeated, "I want Luke Langley to take care of me." Her tone was calm, but Ethan heard the finality in it. It was as if she were saying that if he didn't agree, she would try to die again. The room fell silent once more. Just as Rhiannon thought Ethan would have her tied up and warn her never to mention Luke again, the man at the door finally moved. He pinched the bridge of his nose, his face weary, as if he had finally grown tired of their confrontations. His low, hoarse voice echoed in the room. "I can agree to let that Luke Langley take care of you until you give birth. But you must swear that after the baby is born, you will never see the child again. You will get lost, far away, and never let us see you again." He paused, his deep eyes looking intently at the pale woman before him, his emotions churning. "I'll ask you one more time, Rhiannon, do you agree?" Rhiannon's heart skipped a beat, then slowly settled. "I won't live that long anyway, right?" She turned her head and softly agreed. "Fine." The day Luke arrived, a light rain was falling. Rhiannon had just pushed away Ethan's offered hand, insisting on getting out of the car herself, her large belly making each step a slow, careful shuffle. Then, a dark figure stepped forward to support her. She looked up to see the gentle face from her memories. Luke smiled at her, a clear pang of heartache in his eyes. "I'm sorry I'm late." Rhiannon shook her head and let him help her into the house. Mommy Daisy ran over, her voice excited. When she saw Luke next to Rhiannon, her little face lit up with joy. But then she saw the grim-faced Ethan behind them and instinctively shrank back, tugging timidly on Luke's sleeve. The bad uncle was even scarier today. The small child still remembered Ethan threatening to throw her into the water and clutched Luke's sleeve anxiously. Luke supported Rhiannon with one hand and took Daisy's small hand with the other, walking into the house as naturally as if it were his own. Something caught in Ethan's throat. He stood at the doorway, watching the harmonious scene inside, and suddenly felt like he was the outsider. A fierce jealousy surged within him. He slammed the door shut with a bang, as if the sound could release his barely contained rage. And so, Luke Langley began living at Ethan's house. It was hard to say who was more awkward, him or Ethan. As the due date approached, Rhiannon's condition worsened. She would often faint for no reason. Luckily, Ethan wasn't home much during this time, or her illness would have been impossible to hide. After fainting and waking up once again, she was met with Luke's worried eyes. He took her hand, wanting to take her to the hospital. Rhiannon refused. She smiled bitterly and said, "What's the use? No one can cure me. Why go through all that suffering again?" Luke's heart ached. He knelt down, bringing his eyes level with hers, and said with utmost seriousness, "Rhiannon, have you thought about the future?" Rhiannon pulled her hand away. Her eyes brightened for a moment, then dimmed. "What future do I have? I just hope to God I can give birth to this child safely." She gently stroked her belly, her expression a mix of adoration and helplessness. There were too many things she couldn't let go of, but she was running out of time. "Luke, I've never asked you for anything. This is the first time. Can you promise me that after I die, you'll take care of Daisy?" "Don't you dare say that word." Luke gently covered her lips, his expression pained. Rhiannon smiled and removed his hand. As if not seeing the immense fear in his eyes, she continued, "Life is so long, you deserve a better girl to love you." But Luke pulled his hand away, his tone tinged with anger. What better, girl? Rhiannon, don't you know me by now? I just want you to be well, to live well even if you don't belong to me. I want you to be happy in this world. Rhiannon just looked at him, not arguing, not agreeing. The sadness in her eyes was almost palpable, making Luke's heart ache. After a while, Luke stopped pacing and knelt down again, staring into her eyes. I have an uncle in the States who's a doctor. His medical team is very advanced. Let's go and see them. Maybe there's a way. Rhiannon shook her head, her pale face making her look as if she might blow away with the next breeze. No, I know my own body. I don't even know if this child in my belly will make it. Before she could finish, Luke ran a hand through his hair, suddenly stood up, and strode toward the door without another word. I'm going to talk to Ethan. It was late at night, and Ethan was once again not home. Ever since Luke had moved in, Ethan rarely came back, and when he did, it was just a fleeting appearance, without even a sarcastic remark. Their relationship had twisted into this deformed state. Luke finally found Ethan in a private room at a certain bar. He seemed to be in high spirits, with a hot girl on his arm, playing dice with a group of people. The roars of their game were loud enough to shake the ceiling. Luke frowned as he entered the room. The mix of smoke, alcohol, and perfume made his nose twitch uncomfortably. The moment he walked in, the room fell silent. Again, Ethan slammed the dice cup on the table, shouting with gusto. Only after shouting did he realize the entire room was quiet. A particularly clear voice came from the doorway. Are you done playing? He squinted and looked toward the door. Luke was standing there, a hint of impatience on his face. He smirked, tossed the dice cup on the table, and a compliant girl leaned over to light his cigarette. He took a drag, his eyes narrowed as he looked at Luke, who was still standing at the door. Aren't you supposed to be taking care of a pregnant woman? What are you doing here causing trouble? Or have you stooped so low that you're helping your mistress catch the original spouse cheating? Chapter 20, Luke's body trembled slightly. He hadn't expected Ethan to be so shameless, showing no remorse whatsoever. His lips moved, and he suddenly realized how ridiculous it was for him to have run all over the city to confront this man. He turned to leave. Just then, Ethan roared. Are you all idiots? Get Mr. Langley a drink. The motley crew in the room finally snapped to their senses. They pulled and persuaded, half dragging Luke in and forcing him onto the sofa. Ethan clicked his tongue and personally poured Luke a glass of white liquor, pushing it in front of him. Don't say I, Ethan Crawford, am not generous. Since you came looking for me, have a drink before you speak. Luke's eyelid twitched. Only then did he notice the various empty bottles scattered around the room: red wine, white wine, beer. The glass of liquor Ethan pushed toward him looked to be at least 100 proof, and there was a good 4 ounces of it. His eye twitched again. He pushed the glass away and looked at Ethan. I didn't come here to drink with you. If you're not drinking, then what's the point of talking? Ethan waved his hand. Then get lost. Luke's usually gentle face changed. He looked at Ethan, who was either genuinely drunk or pretending to be, and suddenly grabbed the glass, splashing its entire contents onto that handsome face. Rhiannon is dying, and you still have the mood to be here drinking and picking up women. Ethan, you're a real bastard. The liquor splash seemed to daze Ethan for a moment. It was only when he heard Luke's words that his dark eyes showed a flicker of movement. He wiped the alcohol from his face and let out a hoarse laugh. If I'm not here drinking and picking up women, should I be at home watching you and Rhiannon be all lovey-dovey? Luke's breath hitched, and a nameless fire erupted in his heart. He swung his fist. You bastard, Rhiannon is dying, and you're out here fooling around. Why isn't it you who's dying? Caught off guard, Ethan took the punch but quickly retaliated. The two of them were soon locked in a brawl. Who do you think you are to talk to me like that? I'm teaching you a lesson for Rhiannon, you're human scum, and Rhiannon still. Say her name one more time, and believe me, I'll break your legs right now. Ethan suddenly exploded, grabbing a stool and swinging it violently at Luke's legs. He was held back by the others. Hey boss, let's just have a drink and talk. Peace and harmony, peace and harmony. A stout man grabbed Ethan by the waist and dragged him back, signaling for the others to quickly get Luke out of there, thus averting a disaster. Only after Luke was dragged out did Ethan, persuaded by those around him, finally calm down. He undid a button on his shirt and lit a cigarette for himself. The room fell silent instantly. Smoke curled up and no one knew what Ethan was thinking. No one dared to speak. After a long time, Ethan dropped the extinguished cigarette from his fingers and said faintly, "Let's go." Then he strode out. A black Merced sped down the street, so fast it was gone in a blink. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his face expressionless. Countless faces flashed through his mind, finally settling on the image of Luke's angry face as he swung his fist, his roar echoing. "Rhiannon is dying. Why isn't it you who's dying?" His heart pounded. Impossible. How could that defiant woman possibly die? Luke must have been deliberately trying to humiliate him. He parked the car and walked toward the house without pausing, but stopped the moment he opened the door. The conversation from the living room carried clearly to his ears. "Are you an idiot? You know what he's like. Why did you go and provoke him? Don't do it again. Seeing you like this makes me feel terrible," came Rhiannon's self-reproachful voice. "Then what about you, Rhiannon? Ethan is definitely not someone you can entrust your life to. I'm so worried about you," said Luke. "It's okay," Rhiannon's voice lowered, a sob in her tone. "Just take care of yourself and I'll be at ease. It's just that before she could finish, the soft click of a key interrupted their conversation. They both froze and turned their heads. Ethan tossed his keys onto the console table in the entryway and said without looking up, "It's just that you what?" "Say it," the cotton swab in Rhiannon's hand, which she was using to apply medicine to Luke's wounds, suddenly felt awkward. She stood up and hesitantly reached for Ethan's hand. "Ethan, listen to me. Don't touch me." Ethan flung her away without looking up. The force of his push sent her stumbling back, almost falling to the ground. Luckily, Luke rushed over and caught her, helping her regain her footing. At that moment, Ethan finally turned around, his eyes filled with mockery as he looked at Luke. "Isn't this just perfect? You called me back just to watch you two openly cheat on me right under my nose? Well, congratulations, you've achieved your goal." Luke's face instantly turned ugly. Rhiannon's face turned deathly pale. She struggled to grab Ethan's hand, wanting to explain. "Ethan, listen to me. I told you not to touch me," Ethan roared as if in a state of shock. Realizing his own violent desire to tear the cheating couple to shreds, he reined in his expression and said in as calm and indifferent a tone as he could manage, "You two disgust me." With that, he turned and went upstairs without a backward glance. He didn't see Rhiannon behind him, whose body swayed uncontrollably at the word disgust, and who then fainted. "Rhiannon!" Luke shouted in alarm. However, Ethan, who had already gone upstairs, didn't see the scene below. He once thought that having Rhiannon meant having the world, but then his world betrayed him. When he first heard that she had run off with Luke, he didn't believe it. He thought she was just playing a joke on him. It wasn't until years later, when there was still no word from her, that he started drinking himself into a stupor every day. And when she returned with that child, Daisy, he realized how ridiculous his thoughts had been. Jealousy eroded his sanity, leading him to rashly get engaged to Cecilia to retaliate against Rhiannon. He even vindictively forced her to have his child, just to prove that she still had a little bit of love for him. Ethan slowly closed his eyes. The image of Rhiannon gently dabbing Luke's wounds with a cotton swab flashed in his mind, and a dull ache started in his ribs. Actually, he had gotten hurt at the bar too. Chapter 21. Rhiannon's health was deteriorating. She would often doze off while sitting, or large gushes of blood would pour from her nose. She was like a wilting flower, rapidly fading away. Luke watched, a mix of anger and heartache in his heart, but he couldn't bring himself to say anything. All he could do was silently take care of her, making her as comfortable as possible. Rhiannon would chatter on about many things about Daisy, about the baby in her belly, but she never mentioned herself. She was destined not to be a part of her children's future. Ethan continued to stay away from home. Rhiannon would often sit on the balcony, looking down. From this angle, she could see the gate to the courtyard. She was always the first to see him when he came back. One day, Ethan, out of the blue, called her. "Make dinner and wait for me tonight." It was a simple sentence, lacking even the most basic concern a father might show for the mother of his child, but it sent Rhiannon into a state of ecstasy. She held the phone and hurried downstairs. She stood in front of the refrigerator for a long time, unsure of what to cook. If only she had known, she could have baked him a cake. She wondered if it was too late to buy one now. Today was Ethan's birthday. In the car, Ethan hung up the phone, the corner of his eye catching the baby clothes he had just bought. He didn't know what had gotten into him today. After a meal with a client, he saw the baby clothes in a department store and found himself unable to walk away. In the end, amidst the client's teasing gazes, he bought them and even called Rhiannon to say he was coming home for dinner. Thinking of the joyful voice on the phone, his mood lifted slightly. Right, it's just a meal. What's there to be afraid of? Will she remember my birthday? Ethan wondered, his eyes cast down. Just then, his phone rang again. It was his special assistant. Boss, there's a problem with the project we're following up on in the U.S. branch. Their person in charge feels that our representative isn't showing them enough respect, so they're refusing to sign. What do you think? This project was a major focus for Ethan for the next 3 years. There could be no mistakes. Hearing the assistant's report, he said, "Book me a flight for 2 hours from now. I'll fly to the U.S. personally to talk to their person in charge." Understood. The moment he hung up, a wave of regret washed over him. He had promised to go home for dinner. He stared at the familiar number, his finger hovering over the call button for a long time. In the end, he stuffed the phone into his pocket and drove toward the airport, his face expressionless. Calling her specifically would make it seem like I care too much. I, Ethan Crawford, am not that pathetic. The black Mercedes disappeared at the next traffic light. However, at that moment, Ethan had no idea this departure would be their last. Rhiannon cheerfully busied herself in the kitchen for a long time. She pan-seared his favorite black pepper steak, placed the cake from the bakery on the table, and even ordered a bouquet of daisies, which she carefully arranged in a vase on the dining table, waiting quietly for the master of the house to arrive. But night fell, the steak grew cold, and Ethan still hadn't returned. She wrung her hands in her lap, anxious. She wanted to call him but was afraid of annoying him. All she could do was tell herself that there must be traffic, that he was surely on his way. He had said he would be home for dinner. The light in her eyes gradually dimmed, but a moment later, the ringing of her phone brought a surge of joy. She held her waist and tried to stand up quickly to get her phone from the sofa. Daisy had wanted to see the Christmas tree, so Luke had taken her out. The maids had been dismissed when Luke moved in. At this moment, Rhiannon was alone in the house. She took a stumbling step forward, her large belly making her unsteady. Suddenly, her vision went black, and she collapsed to the floor, unconscious. A meter away, the phone continued to ring tirelessly over and over. Luke stood with Daisy in front of a popcorn stand. He had called several times, but no one answered. He frowned slightly. Daisy, wrapped around his neck, asked sweetly, "Did Mommy not answer the phone? Does she want popcorn?" Taking Daisy out today was partly for her to have fun, and partly because Luke smiled bitterly to himself. Rhiannon was so excited about celebrating Ethan's birthday. What was he doing hanging around the house? They should be having dinner together right now, Luke thought with a hint of jealousy. When the line went dead again, he hung up, thinking he shouldn't disturb them. But a little while later, a growing sense of unease filled him. He turned to Daisy and said, "Sweetie, let's skip the popcorn for now. Let's go back and check on Mommy, okay?" Daisy's eyes widened. She looked longingly at the popcorn machine, then nodded reluctantly. "Okay, Mommy must be tired with the new baby. Let's go see her." So Luke carried Daisy and hurried home. But the moment he stepped inside, a thick smell of blood filled the air. He slowed his steps, carefully calling Rhiannon's name. Suddenly, Daisy let out a sharp scream. Luke quickly put her down. At the junction of the living room and dining room, a large pool of dark red blood covered the floor. The white tiles were stained crimson. Rhiannon lay unconscious in the pool of blood. "Rhiannon," Luke's voice changed. He scooped up the blood-soaked Rhiannon and rushed out the door. At 4 a.m, Ethan's plane landed. The moment it touched down, his heart seized, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. He clutched his chest, the sharp pain slowly subsiding after a long while. But he still sat in a daze for some time. It wasn't until a flight attendant came to remind him that he rubbed his throbbing temples. "I must be too tired lately," he thought. "I need to rest properly when I get back." He then grabbed his bag and got off the plane. Only then did he realize he had packed the little yellow baby jumpsuit in his bag and brought it with him. He was surprised as he looked at the outfit, and then he remembered he hadn't called Rhiannon. Considering the time difference, Ethan smiled bitterly and gave up. It had been so long anyway, calling now would be pointless. "I'll finish this project and go back. It won't take long," he had already decided. This time, when he went back, he would have an open and honest talk with Rhiannon, no matter what. But first, he had to take care of work. Chapter 22, on the other side of the world, Rhiannon was on the brink of death in the emergency room. If, my condition is bad, please, you must save my child, Rhiannon pleaded, grabbing the doctor's hand, her face pale. The doctor gently patted her tightly clenched fingers. His voice, from behind the mask, was gentle. Don't worry, it's just a C-section. Although the baby took a fall, you were about to go into labor anyway. It won't be a big problem, so don't be so nervous. Hearing the doctor's reassuring words, Rhiannon didn't relax. Instead, she gripped his white coat even tighter and said, word by word, you must promise me, if anything goes wrong. Save the child first. Her life was already almost over. Whether she lived or died didn't matter much to her anymore. But the child was different. It was Ethan's bloodline. No matter how much she hadn't wanted him to be born into this world, at the final, critical moment, she chose to give birth to him. At least it would leave Ethan with something to remember her by, even though he probably didn't care. Rhiannon's consciousness began to fade. Outside the operating room, Luke sat on a bench in the hospital corridor, holding Daisy, his gaze vacant and lost. At 4 p.m, U.S. time, Ethan politely bid farewell to the head of the branch office. As he turned to walk to the parking garage, his steps were light. In his briefcase was the contract he had just signed. With this deal settled, the company's development for the next 3 years would take a huge leap forward. He would also have more time to think about his relationship with Rhiannon. Counting the days, the baby in Rhiannon's belly was almost 9 months along. It wouldn't be long before it was born. Then, even if just for the sake of the child, they should sit down and have a proper talk. With light steps, Ethan got into the driver's seat and drove toward the airport. About 10 minutes from the airport, his phone rang again. Seeing that it was Rhiannon's number, he answered in a good mood. Hello, finally decided to call me? But the next second, a dejected male voice on the other end made his cheerful expression freeze. Rhiannon is dead. Are you satisfied now? Ethan's hand trembled on the steering wheel. The car swerved sharply and crashed into the roadside greenery. About 2 minutes later, Ethan emerged from the car, clutching his bleeding forehead, and ran toward the airport. Blood, an endless sea of blood, clouded his vision. He vaguely saw Rhiannon lying in a pool of blood, reaching out to him, seeming to call his name. The next moment, before he even reached the airport, Ethan clutched his head and collapsed outside the bustling terminal. Ethan woke with a start to find himself in a hospital bed. Sitting beside him was not Rhiannon, but Cecilia. He frowned, wondering if the car crash had given him a concussion. Was he hallucinating? How could Rhiannon be dead? They say the good die young, but a scourge like her should live 1,000 years. How could she possibly die before him? Where's Rhiannon? He asked, his voice hoarse. Cecilia sat in her wheelchair, her scarred but pretty face twisted into a fierce grimace. She covered her face and began to sob. All you care about is Rhiannon your fiancé, or am I? Ethan's brow furrowed tightly. A sharp pain shot through his head, making him lose all patience for pleasantries. What are you talking about? I'm asking you where she is. Cecilia's hand paused over her face. In a corner he couldn't see, her lips curved into a strange smile. Hess, Rhiannon is dead. Thoroughly dead. No one will be competing with me for Ethan anymore. Just then, the door to the room opened, and a doctor in a white coat walked in. Mr. Ethan Crawford. The doctor handed him a form. According to Miss Rhiannon Somers's final wishes, she has entrusted the child she gave birth to you. We hope you will sign this confirmation form. Ethan threw the thin piece of paper aside, his face like ice. I haven't even seen her body. What confirmation form am I supposed to sign? Is this how your hospital deceives people? The barely concealed resistance in his tone made even the doctor, who was used to life and death, feel a twinge of sympathy. He adopted a more lenient attitude toward Ethan and tried to console him. I can understand your feelings. At the same time, I greatly admire Miss Rhiannon's strength. As a mother, to bravely give birth to a child while suffering from leukemia, and even at the very end, Ethan's gaze shot toward him like a sword, filled with shock, confusion, and a sense of absurdity. What kind of joke is this? How could Rhiannon have leukemia? Get out of my way, I need to go ask her myself. Don't think you can just run off after having the baby. I still have a lot of scores to settle with her, As Ethan spoke, he tried to get out of bed, but his dizziness allowed the doctor to easily push him back down. The old doctor, who had seen his share of life and death, looked at him with an expression of pity. Under his gaze, Ethan's struggles slowly ceased, and a look of despair crept into his dark eyes. "She must have loved you very much." The old doctor's words struck him like a hammer blow to the chest. His entire heart felt as if it were being squeezed by a giant hand, released, then squeezed again. Scenes flashed before his eyes like a movie. Rhiannon's frequent nosebleeds, her desperate demand for Luke to take care of her in the later stages of her pregnancy, and even earlier, when she had secretly taken birth control pills. At the time, he had thought she was so unwilling to have his child that she would take such harmful drugs, and he had humiliated her for it. Ethan suddenly raised his arm and pressed the back of his hand to his eyes. They felt sore and dry, but no tears would come. So, she hadn't left him to run off with Luke. She had left because she knew she had a terminal illness and had chosen the most decisive way to leave him. So, it wasn't that she didn't love him. It was because she loved him too much that she didn't want him to spend the next few decades alone. So, Ethan had been born a prince, always seeing and experiencing the best, which made him unable to tolerate betrayal. If he had noticed sooner, if he hadn't been blinded by jealousy, could all of this have been avoided? If he had discovered her leukemia earlier, they could have faced it together. Just then, a nurse walked in, holding a little girl's hand. Ethan opened his eyes and looked at Daisy, the child he had once threatened to drown, the child he had never given a proper look. "Miss Somers said that Daisy is also your child. She hopes you will treat her well for the sake of your own flesh and blood," the nurse said. Meeting Ethan's gaze, Daisy shrank back behind the nurse in fear. Chapter 23, Daisy didn't know what had happened. The last time she saw her mommy, she was lying in a pool of blood, and then Uncle Luke had covered her eyes. They had waited outside the operating room for a long time. Finally, Uncle Luke had brought her to this nurse and told her he was going to take care of Mommy, but he never came back. Daisy didn't know how her mommy was. She was anxious, but she was even more afraid of the man in front of her. She hadn't forgotten that this man had said he would throw her into the water. Tears welled up in her eyes, but Daisy tried her best to hold them back. Mommy had told her not to cry. Ethan looked at Daisy's small, shrinking body, and the redness in his eyes faded slightly. But then he remembered his threat to throw the child into the water, and his remorse grew even deeper. He rubbed his face, not trying to communicate with Daisy. Instead, he stood up and said to the doctor, "Take me to see her." The doctor and nurse exchanged a look. Ethan turned back, confused. "Mr. Langley has already claimed Miss Somers's remains. The baby is still here. Why don't you go see the baby first?" Ethan fought back the violent urge rising within him and said, his face expressionless, "Lead the way." The baby was in an incubator, a tiny, frail bundle with its eyes still closed. The doctor explained that because of the premature birth, the baby was still very weak and might have some congenital deficiencies, so they needed to be extra careful when raising him. Fortunately, the child had not inherited Rhiannon's leukemia. It was the greatest gift a mother could give her child. Ethan stood quietly, looking at the baby through the glass. He was so small, his eyes and nose scrunched together, his hands tiny, as if he might not survive. But this was the child Rhiannon had given her life to bring into the world. A dull ache started in his heart again. He clutched his chest, suddenly gasping for air as if someone were choking him. A nurse beside him cried out in alarm and rushed over, but he had already lost consciousness again. 3 days later, Ethan opened the door to his home, holding the swaddled baby in his left arm and Daisy's hand in his right. He was met by the sight of Cecilia. Cecilia was in her wheelchair, seemingly tidying up the living room. When she saw Ethan, she turned and smiled, wheeling over to take Daisy's hand. "You're back. Daisy, come, let your aunt hold your hand." Daisy pulled her hand away from Ethan's and hid behind the door in fear. The awkward smile on Cecilia's face froze for a second. Then she looked up and said, "Daisy must be too sad. Ethan, who gave you the key?" Ethan looked down at his fiancée in the wheelchair, her face a picture of innocence, and asked, his expression blank. Cecilia faltered, unable to find the right words. Just then, another person emerged from the kitchen, holding an apron Rhiannon often used. It was covered in grease stains, and she was clearly using it as a rag. She casually tossed it into the trash can. The can was already overflowing with Rhiannon's belongings, piled high. The veins on Ethan's forehead throbbed. Yvette Shaw didn't notice, instead approaching with a smile. "Ethan, you're finally back. I just finished cleaning. I haven't gotten to the second floor yet. From now on, who the hell let you in?" Ethan roared, his murderous aura cutting off Yvette's words. "Oh, Ethan, what's wrong? Did someone upset you?" It's okay. From now on, Cec, I will move in with you." "You too will." Before she could finish, Ethan kicked the trash can beside her, sending Rhiannon's disfigured personal items spilling all over the floor. She jumped, staring blankly at the enraged Ethan, and stammered, Ethan, what's wrong?" The baby in his arms stirred restlessly, its mouth puckering as if about to cry. Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to calm himself. He pointed at the door and said to Yvette, his face expressionless, "You get out first. I need to talk to her." Yvette, still holding a calendar she had taken from the living room wall, hesitated, looking at Cecilia, reluctant to leave. "Get out," Ethan shouted. Startled, Yvette scrambled out. Now the baby in his arms could no longer hold back and began to wail. Ethan frowned, ignoring the dumbfounded Cecilia. He went back to the car to get the formula he had just bought, and, following the instructions on the can, clumsily prepared a bottle for the baby. He tested the temperature on the back of his hand. Satisfied, he was about to feed the smacking baby when he saw Daisy hiding behind the kitchen door, watching him with wary eyes. Ethan sighed softly and beckoned to her, handing her the bottle. "If you're worried, just say so. You feed him, be careful not to let him choke." He placed the baby in a corner of the sofa and let Daisy feed the little one. Just then, the bottle was snatched from Daisy's hand by another slender hand. Cecilia's self-righteous voice followed. "Let me do it. Daisy is still a child herself. I'll have to take care of them eventually anyway, so let me get some practice in." However, Ethan snatched the bottle back from her and placed it back in Daisy's hand. He then turned to Cecilia and said, "Come here, we need to talk." He walked to the other end of the sofa and sat down. The moment he turned away, Cecilia's eyes turned sinister. She shot Daisy a glare, then wheeled herself over to Ethan, a sweet smile on her face. Ethan's fingers twitched. He glanced at the two children, one big and one small, and fought the urge to take out his cigarettes. "Let's break off the engagement," he said without blinking. Cecilia was stunned. A moment later, tears welled up in her eyes, threatening to fall, making her look pitiful and wronged. Her fingers, gripping the armrests of her wheelchair, turned white. "Ethan, darling, why? What did I do wrong?" "I don't agree." In the past, Ethan would have softened, but now he just stood up and said with unusual coldness, "I'm just informing you. I wasn't asking for your consent." Seeing this unfamiliar Ethan, Cecilia laughed. "Is it because of Rhiannon? Did she say something to you? Even though I'm her sister, she's too vicious. She could abandon you and run off with Luke Langley back then. Is she playing the same trick on you now? She won't even let you go now that she's dead." "Ethan, darling, don't fall for it." The anger in Ethan's heart flared. He turned, took out a piece of paper, and threw it in Cecilia's face, his voice as cold as ice. "How vicious she is, isn't that something you fabricated? Cecilia, you really are a good sister to her." Chapter 24, a piece of paper floated down from Cecilia's face, and she caught it with a pale hand. It was likely a suicide note Rhiannon had left for Ethan, knowing her end was near. "Ethan, when you read this letter, I should be gone. I don't know if my death will appease your anger. I didn't mean to leave you back then. It was Cecilia who forced me to go. Luke and I are innocent. Daisy is your child. She inherited my leukemia, and I didn't dare let you know, so I had to beg Luke to take me abroad. Maybe my time is really running out. I've been dreaming a lot lately, dreaming of when we were dating, talking about our life if we had children, sometimes even bickering over their names. Those were such happy memories. Ethan, be careful of Cecilia. I don't know if you'll listen to this, but this is the last time I'll say it. Cecilia is not the right person for you. I am a dying person, but you still have decades of a wonderful life ahead of you. You deserve a better girl to love you. Ethan, I'm sorry I can't say goodbye to you in person. As for Daisy and the baby in my belly, I hope you will treat them well. Even if you have another partner in the future, please don't abandon them, okay? I am fine, do not worry." "No, she's slandering me." Cecilia threw the paper away, her voice sharp and shrill. She rushed to grab Ethan's sleeve, but he dodged her. "Ethan, darling, don't you believe me anymore? My leg and the scars on my face that harlot Rhiannon did this to me, she said all this just to drive a wedge between us. She won't even let me go now that she's dead." Believe me, before Cecilia could finish, the bodyguards Ethan had called came and carried her out, wheelchair and all. As the door was closing, she heard Ethan's cold voice. "I'll investigate the car crash from back then. And all the filthy things you've done to Rhiannon over the years. You'd better pray I don't find out. Otherwise, I'll make you pay for every single one." "No," a piercing scream echoed in the courtyard of the Crawford estate as Cecilia was thrown out the door, her wheelchair tumbling down the steps. Ethan seemed not to hear. He turned around to see Daisy holding an empty bottle, looking at him with fear, trying to shrink herself and her little brother into a corner. The ice on his face thawed slightly, replaced by a look of helplessness. He rubbed his temples, unsure of how to interact with the child. After a long silence, Daisy's stomach growled. She clutched it in fear, trying to quiet the sound. Ethan came back to his senses, took the empty bottle from her, and looked at the baby, who was fast asleep on the sofa. He felt a sense of relief. He turned to Daisy and asked, "Hungry?" Daisy shook her head warily, but her stomach betrayed her with another growl. She was so embarrassed she wanted to disappear into the floor. "What do I do? The big bad wolf is smiling at me. Ah, the big bad wolf is going to pat my head. Should I dodge or not?" Ethan took his hand off Daisy's head, feeling a little awkward at her stiff reaction. He cleared his throat and pretended nothing had happened. "You watch your brother. I'll go make you a bowl of noodles." Because of Rhiannon's strong request, all the maids had been dismissed. Ethan had to cook himself. When he brought the bowl of noodles out, he caught Daisy's cautious gaze. He placed the bowl on the dining table and beckoned her over. For the first time, the father and daughter sat face to face, eating peacefully. Whether it was out of fear or habit, Daisy picked at her noodles one by one. By the time Ethan had finished his bowl, she hadn't even eaten a tenth of hers. He sat at the table, waiting for her. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The bowl in front of her didn't seem to have gotten any emptier. "Are you eating like a cat? At this rate, you'll be hungry again before you're even finished," he couldn't help but say. His sudden voice in the quiet house startled Daisy. Her hand shook and her chopsticks fell to the floor. Ethan took a deep breath, picked up the chopsticks, and handed her a new pair. "I won't rush you. Take your time. I'll go check on your brother." If he stayed, the child probably wouldn't finish her meal all night. Ethan went to the living room and looked at the swaddled baby on the sofa. The little one, oblivious to everything, was sleeping soundly, sucking on his thumb. Ethan smiled, gently removed the baby's finger from his mouth, and wiped it with a tissue. Then he went to the balcony, opened the window, and lit a cigarette. Smoke curled up, his handsome face half hidden in the dim light, an aura of sadness enveloping him. Daisy tilted her head and looked at the man smoking alone on the balcony. She suddenly felt a little sorry for him. "I'll stop being afraid of him for now," Daisy thought, as she finally finished her noodles. Ethan's words to Cecilia were not a threat. From that day on, Cecilia's family was hit by an unprecedented disaster. First, Yvette was in a car accident. Both her legs were crushed, and she lay in the hospital, her fate uncertain. Then, her father's company ran into trouble and was forced to declare bankruptcy. Even the bars and small restaurants she had invested her personal savings in were found to have numerous problems and were forced to close. The Sommers family had fallen, their tree toppled and their monkeys scattered, living a life of extreme hardship. Listening to his subordinates report, Ethan felt no sense of vengeful pleasure, only a deep exhaustion. It had been a month since Rhiannon's death. In that month, he had reduced Cecilia's family to a wretched, cornered state, seemingly avenging Rhiannon. But only he knew that every night he couldn't sleep. At first, he thought it was just grief, that it would get better with time. But a month passed and the situation didn't improve. It only got worse. To have the energy to take care of the 2 children, he had to rely on sleeping pills to get a normal night's rest. "Rhiannon, you left so easily, but you've made my life a misery," he thought, his face expressionless. Chapter 25. Time passed slowly, and Ethan struggled to adapt to a life without Rhiannon. Although a boundless panic would envelop and consume him in the dead of night, making him wish for death, he knew he couldn't die. Rhiannon had left him with 2 children. No matter what, he had to raise them until they were grown. A bitter smile touched his lips. Rhiannon, you even thought of this. How could I not live according to your wishes? 3 difficult months passed. One day, Ethan took Leo to the hospital for a checkup. Leo waved his arms and legs, reaching out for a doctor he saw often, showing no signs of being a premature baby. The doctor took Leo, his heart filled with admiration. This Mr. Crawford, after losing his wife, had managed to raise his child so well. It was truly admirable. He smiled at Ethan and signaled for a nurse to give him the medical report. Leo is very well taken care of. There are no major health issues, but he does have some congenital deficiencies, so you need to be extra careful in his daily life. Just then, the doctor noticed Daisy, who was standing quietly by Ethan's side. He sighed and took a white rabbit candy from the pocket of his coat, handing it to her. His own daughter was about Daisy's age. She had given it to him that morning when he left for work. Ethan nodded, and only then did Daisy take the candy, whispering a soft "thank you." The doctor patted Daisy's head. "Daisy, why don't you go play with the nurse for a little while? Your dad and I have something to talk about." Daisy nodded obediently and was led out by the nurse. Ethan's lips moved, his voice tired. "Still no news about the bone marrow." The doctor's smile faded. "Daisy's condition is starting to worsen. The hospital hasn't been able to find a suitable match. If we don't perform the surgery soon, it will become very difficult later on." Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose, a shadow of worry in his eyes. After learning that Rhiannon had died of leukemia, Ethan had taken both children for a comprehensive checkup. To his relief, Leo was fine, but Daisy was diagnosed with the same hereditary leukemia as her mother. From that day on, he had been asking the hospital to help him find a suitable bone marrow match for a transplant, but to no avail. Leo was too young and premature. He didn't dare risk using him. As his thoughts swirled, he suddenly heard a commotion outside the door. He faintly heard someone call Daisy's name. His heart leaped, and he ran out. The moment he opened the door, a nurse grabbed his hand. "I'm so sorry." Someone snatched Daisy. Ethan followed the nurse, running up to the hospital's rooftop. The 8-story hospital had a wide, open rooftop. A crowd of patients and nurses had already gathered in one corner, with gasps of alarm coming from the crowd. Ethan pushed through the crowd and saw Cecilia's venomous face. She had one hand on Daisy's neck, the other pushing her forcefully over the railing. Half of Daisy's small body was already dangling over the edge. At her feet lay a man, unconscious. He must have been the one who helped her grab Daisy. The sight made Ethan's eyes turn bloodshot. "Cecilia," he roared, gritting his teeth. Hearing his voice, Cecilia scanned the crowd, her eyes finally landing on him. A small smile touched her lips. "Ethan, darling, you're here," she said, her tone a little flirtatious, but it sent a chill down the spines of those around her. Ethan took a step forward, his face like frost. "Let Daisy go. We can talk about whatever you want." Cecilia giggled. Ignoring Daisy's struggles, one might have found her laughter endearing. "Ethan, darling, I've been a fool once. Why would I fall for your tricks again? If I let this woman's child go, the next step would be for you to push me off here, wouldn't it?" Ethan's thin lips tightened, but he said nothing. Cecilia continued. "Ethan, I, Cecilia Somers, have never done anything to wrong you. I've been submissive and devoted to you. And what did I get in return? You used every means possible to ruin my family. Ethan, where is your heart?" Her accusations reached the ears of the onlookers on the rooftop, and many began to whisper among themselves. But Ethan seemed not to hear. He looked up at Cecilia, the frost in his eyes almost enough to consume a person. "You say you've never done anything to wrong me. Who planned and instigated the kidnapping back then? Who is responsible for your disability and the scars on your face? Who forced Rhiannon to flee to a foreign country when she was at her most vulnerable? And who used sweet words to deceive me into an engagement, only to turn around and humiliate your own sister? Cecilia, do you dare say you didn't do any of these things?" Ethan's questions came fast and furious, like a clap of thunder striking Cecilia's head. She was dazed for a moment, then her expression turned even more sinister. "So what? It was Rhiannon's own incompetence. Who's to blame for that?" A cold smile touched Ethan's lips. She really was Yvette's daughter. They even spoke the same way. Cecilia's grip on Daisy tightened, making the child sob. Ethan's heart clenched. He had to say again, "Tell me what you want. Just let her go first." A tragic smile crossed Cecilia's face. I want 80% of your company's shares. Will you give them to me? In front of her, Ethan took out his phone and made a call. Then he looked at her and said calmly, "In 10 minutes, my assistant will bring the share transfer agreement." Ha! Cecilia let out a cold laugh. Ethan, you're so cruel. My dad was hounded by debt collectors until he jumped off a building. My mom killed herself in the hospital. And now you think a share transfer agreement can get rid of me? Then, what do you want? Tell me. I'll give you whatever I can, Ethan said. I want you to kneel and apologize to me, Cecilia said. Ethan's eyes flashed and he actually bent his knees. A twisted, triumphant smile appeared on Cecilia's face. But then, everything changed. Ethan's bent knee suddenly shot up, kicking Cecilia. She and her wheelchair went flying. At the same time, she let out a desperate scream, her hand on Daisy's neck yanking hard. Even in death, I'll take someone with me. Chapter 26, the moment Daisy fell, Ethan lunged forward and grabbed her hand, pulling her back to safety in a heart-stopping rescue. Cecilia, however, crashed to the ground with her wheelchair, becoming a mangled mess. Still shaken, Ethan held Daisy close, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it would leap out of his throat. Daisy clung to his warm, broad chest, her small body trembling. Ethan's heart ached, and he gently stroked her small back. It's okay, the bad person fell. I'm sorry, Daisy. Ethan's nose stung, and this proud man couldn't help but shed a tear. Daisy snuggled into his embrace and whispered, Daddy. Ethan's body went rigid. In disbelief, he gently pushed her away, only to see her face covered in blood. His heart stopped for a beat, and he scooped her up, running downstairs. Doctor, where's the doctor? Daisy was frightened, so her condition has worsened. The bone marrow transplant needs to be done as soon as possible, the doctor said, taking off his mask. Ethan's gaze fell on the sleeping Daisy in the hospital bed, and a wave of despair washed over him, making him wish he was the one with leukemia. How long can she last? Ethan asked, his voice hoarse. If it continues to worsen, 2 years at most. The doctor held up 2 fingers, then his gaze fell on Ethan's bloodied arm. You should probably have a nurse treat that wound. I'll watch her. Ethan shook his head and sat down by Daisy's bed, ignoring the blood, grit, and dust on his arm. The doctor sighed and called a nurse to bring a first aid kit. His arm had been scraped when he pulled Daisy up. Ethan let the nurse tend to his wound, his other hand gently stroking Daisy's soft hair. This child just called me Daddy. He remembered the first time he saw her, wearing a beautiful dress and a cute bow. She had called him Uncle in a clear, sweet voice. How had he reacted then? He had sneered and slapped Rhiannon. From that day on, the child had been terrified of him. After she moved in, even when she was trembling with fear, she never cried or screamed. She was so well behaved, it was heartbreaking. Even when she vaguely knew her mother might never come back. She just quietly took care of her little brother, ate her meals, and tried to make herself invisible in his presence. His fingers brushed through her soft hair, his eyes filled with tenderness. After a long moment, that tenderness turned into a steely resolve. Daisy, no matter what, Daddy will risk everything to save you. A month later, a notice was posted and pinned on all of Crawford Corporation's websites and apps. The eldest daughter of the Crawford family was suffering from leukemia. Anyone who could donate bone marrow would receive 10% of the company's shares. Crawford Corp's daily revenue was in the tens of millions, let alone 10% of its shares. For an ordinary person, the annual dividends alone would be enough to live on for several lifetimes. This became the most talked about topic in high society. 10% of Crawford Corp shares was a mouth-watering prize even for the tycoons. But as if fate were playing a cruel joke on him, despite the many people who came to be tested every day, not a single one was a match. And Daisy's condition worsened day by day. A year later, in a villa in Texas, USA, Rhiannon, having just received the news, was packing her bags. Her face was still flushed with anger. After putting the last item in her bag, she slung it over her shoulder and prepared to leave for the airport. Luke Langley blocked her path. She looked up at him. Luke, are you still going to stop me? Luke smiled bitterly but stood firm, trying to persuade her. It's not that I didn't want to tell you, but you've only just recovered. Going now would be a life or death gamble. Rhiannon's eyes flickered, but she remained insistent. That's my daughter. I can't just stand by and watch her die. Luke's gaze was deep and long, as if filled with 1,000 unspoken words. He paused for a moment. Just as Rhiannon thought he was about to give in, he said, "You're also the person I risked my life to save. If you don't cherish your own body, how is that fair to me?" Rhiannon froze, then turned and threw her bag onto the sofa in a huff. "Then what do you suggest I do?" A year and a half ago, she had thought she was dead. When she woke up, she found herself in Texas. Luke had faked her death certificate and moved her from China to the US. He had begged his uncles, who were doctors, to cure her. The treatment had been perilous, and even the top medical team said it was a miracle from God, but she had survived. After surviving, she had lost all hope and stayed in that place with Luke. Luke had started pursuing her during that year, but she was always thinking about her 2 children and wanted to go back to see them. Luke had stopped her time and time again. She grew suspicious and checked the Chinese websites, only to find out about Daisy's serious condition and the widespread news of Ethan's plea for a bone marrow donor. And so, the current scene unfolded. Luke looked at the fuming Rhiannon with a sense of helplessness, a bitter ache in his heart. After all the trouble he went through to save her life, she didn't seem to cherish it at all. The moment she recovered, she wanted to run off and donate her bone marrow. "Yes, it was her daughter, but you are also the person I hold dearest in my heart. Oh, well, I've lost to you again." Luke walked over to Rhiannon, wanting to stroke her hair, but she turned away in a huff. He pursed his lips and said, "I can agree to let you go, but you have to follow my arrangements." Rhiannon's eyes lit up. A week later, in B-City, China, Ethan opened the hospital room door, holding Leo's hand. Daisy, lying in bed, called out Daddy in pleasant surprise. Leo, now a year and a half old, held up a small bouquet of daisies to his sister like a treasure. "Sister, flowers." Daisy took them carefully, her face wreathed in smiles. "They're beautiful. Thank you, Leo." She leaned over and kissed him, then took a candy from her pocket and secretly slipped it into his hand. "You can only have one, okay? Don't tell Daddy," she whispered. Leo nodded vigorously. But Ethan had seen everything. Chapter 27, before Leo could even unwrap the candy, a hand swiftly snatched it away. Ethan's voice followed. "Daisy gave you candy again, didn't she?" It was a statement, not a question. Leo's dark eyes followed the candy to Ethan's hand. He pouted and turned away, saying nothing. "HMPH, I'm angry. I don't like Daddy anymore." Ethan looked at Daisy's pleading eyes with amusement, then handed the candy back. "Because of Daisy, this is the last one you can have." Leo's face immediately lit up. He popped the candy into his mouth and hugged his sister, cooing, "Thank you, sister." Daisy affectionately stroked Leo's head, a faint smile on her pale face. For a moment, she looked just like Rhiannon when she smiled. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Just then, there were 3 knocks on the door. Knock, knock, knock. Ethan came back to his senses, glancing at his watch in confusion. It wasn't time for the doctors and nurses to do their rounds. And no one in B-City should know about this room and image of the hospital rooftop a year ago, and Cecilia's twisted face flashed in his mind, and his nerves tensed. He signaled for Daisy to take Leo and stand back, then opened the door. He was met with Luke Langley's gentle face. Ethan's eyes darkened, then his expression changed dramatically. From behind Luke, a head peeked out. It was none other than Rhiannon. Rhiannon didn't look at Ethan. She brushed past the frozen man, and upon seeing Daisy, her eyes lit up. "Daisy," she pushed Ethan aside and went in to hug her daughter. Luke then stepped into the room. Ethan remained at the door, motionless, a warmth spreading through his eyes. Over by the bed, Daisy was already teaching Leo to say, "Mama." Ethan finally came to his senses, cleared his throat, and pretended nothing had happened. "Long time no see." Rhiannon seemed not to hear, busy taking out the gifts she had bought for the 2 children one by one. It was Luke who walked over and greeted him softly. "I never thought we'd meet again. Life is full of surprises." Only then did Ethan look up at the man who was about his height, but had a completely different temperament. He squeezed out a sentence through gritted teeth. "The last time you took Rhiannon away when you took her away, I swore that if I ever saw you again, I'd beat you up." The words had barely left his mouth when a heavy punch flew at him. Luke, caught off guard, took the full force of the blow. "What are you doing?" Rhiannon, who had been talking to Daisy, quickly stepped between them and knelt to check on Luke's injuries. Ethan's anger flared. He pointed at Luke and said, "You're still protecting him, do you know that?" Back then, his throat tightened and he couldn't speak. Rhiannon checked Luke and, confirming it was just a minor injury, casually looked up at Ethan, her voice cold. "What about back then? I'm here to see Daisy. It has nothing to do with you." A bucket of cold water was thrown over Ethan, and his heart clenched in pain. He stumbled back a few steps, his back hitting the door panel, as if that was the only thing keeping him from collapsing. He fought to control his trembling fingers, his lips quivering as he tried to say something, but no words would come. What could he say? Ask her why she had come back from the dead? Or demand to know why, if she was alive, she hadn't come back to see him? What right did he have? The intense pain made his head throb. He fumbled for a bottle of pills, shaking as he swallowed a few. Only then did he feel a little calmer, his gaze meeting Rhiannon's surprised eyes. Just then, the doctor came in for his daily checkup. Rhiannon's surprise subsided, and she said to the doctor, "Hello, could you please take me for a compatibility test?" For over a year, there had always been a few people coming for testing each day. The doctor didn't ask any questions and took her away. As her blood was being drawn, Rhiannon looked at the doctor, who was taking notes. The image of Ethan swallowing his pills kept flashing in her mind. Although she had promised Luke she would leave after the transplant and have no further contact with Ethan, she couldn't help but ask. "Doctor, have you been in charge of the girl with leukemia for a long time?" she asked casually. The doctor had taken over halfway through and had been responsible for Daisy for almost a year. Apart from the incident with Cecilia, he knew a little about the father and daughter. He answered without looking up. "Yes, it's quite a sad story. Her mother died after giving birth to her little brother, and she inherited the leukemia. With a newborn to take care of and work to manage, Mr. Crawford has had a tough time." He paused and looked at Rhiannon. "You're here for the 10% shares too, right? Unfortunately, after a year, no one has been a match. Mr. Crawford's depression has gotten worse because of this. He got some tranquilizers from me just the other day." Realizing he had probably said too much, he gave her a few instructions and left. Rhiannon sat on the hospital bench for a long time, lost in thought. So, he has depression? The compatibility test was, unsurprisingly, a success. As Rhiannon was confirming the surgery date with the doctor, a strong force suddenly pulled her away, interrupting their conversation. "Hey, what are you doing?" Rhiannon tried to shake off Ethan's hand, but he pressed her against the wall, immobilizing her. She could only glare at him angrily. Ethan's face was like frost. He leaned in close and said, word by word, "You're a patient yourself. What are you doing getting involved in this?" Rhiannon took a deep breath. "Let go of my hand first. There are so many people in the office." Only then did Ethan loosen his grip slightly. He said to the doctors in the room, "I'm sorry, my wife is being mischievous. I'll talk to her about the surgery." With that, he ignored Rhiannon's protests and pulled her out, leaving a room full of bewildered doctors. Mr. Crawford's wife? Didn't she die in childbirth? What's going on? Meanwhile, Rhiannon was being dragged by Ethan down the hospital corridor. "Let go of me." She finally broke free and stood her ground. "If you have something to say, say it. If not, I'm going to sign the agreement," she said coldly. Ethan released her and cupped her face, kissing her fiercely. Ethan, you're crazy." A sharp slap landed on his face. Ethan didn't flinch, instead capturing her lips again and murmuring, "Yes, I am crazy. I'm going crazy thinking about you." Chapter 28. The word crazy struck a chord in Rhiannon's heart. A wave of sorrow washed over her, and she bit down hard on the tongue that was exploring her mouth. "Oof!" Ethan let out a muffled groan and finally pulled away, resting his head on her shoulder and chuckling softly. Rhiannon stiffened slightly. Has this man lost his mind? Just as she was debating whether to push him away, Ethan sighed softly in her ear. "Rhiannon, you have no idea how happy I am." Rhiannon rolled her eyes internally, pushed him away, and wiped the blood from her lips. "I'm sorry, but seeing you doesn't make me happy at all." A sharp pain shot through Ethan's heart. Rhiannon turned to leave, but he grabbed her wrist. "You're not going. You're a patient yourself. What are you doing getting tested for Daisy?" A smile touched Rhiannon's lips, and she finally said what was on her mind. "Are you so depressed you've lost your mind? If I were sick, wouldn't the doctors have found out?" Ethan stood frozen. Rhiannon shook off his hand. "And another thing, did you forget that I'm also Daisy's legal guardian? I don't need your signature for the surgery." With that, she turned and left, leaving Ethan standing alone, a gust of wind from the window scattering the myriad emotions in his eyes. The surgery date was set for 20 days later. Rhiannon, under Luke's arrangement, was also admitted to the hospital, sharing a room with Daisy. Leo was very confused about having an extra mother, but when he saw this beautiful mama give him candy that his daddy didn't dare take away, he decided to cling to this strong new support. Daisy was different. She had been taken to the U.S. while still in Rhiannon's womb and had gone through a series of major and minor events. Although she couldn't quite grasp the details, she instinctively relied on Rhiannon, even needing her to hold her to sleep. Looking at her daughter's sharp, pale chin, a fine, dense pain pricked Rhiannon's heart. If only I had known sooner. Luke had only remembered to take her body, but he had left Daisy behind. Thinking about this, Rhiannon had some thoughts. It probably wasn't that he forgot, but that he was unwilling. After all, by leaving Daisy behind, Ethan would have a tie, something to hold him back from doing anything too crazy. Daisy would always be there to remind him of his past mistakes, pulling him, dragging him, making him afraid to die or to come looking for her. Luke, Rhiannon's eyes flickered, then dimmed. Even if Luke had other intentions, so what? Anyone in the world could criticize him, but not her. Just then, footsteps approached. Rhiannon looked up to see Ethan. He stood in front of her and handed her a peeled apple. Rhiannon turned her head away. The next moment, the apple was stuffed into her mouth. Angrily, she took a bite, as if she were biting into someone's flesh. "Don't think this means I'm not angry anymore," she said, her cheeks puffed out as she chewed, making Ethan want to poke them. But in the end, he just sat down beside her and joined her in watching the scenery. Rhiannon was in a sky garden at the hospital. Many patients were taking walks. Not far away, an old man was pushing an old woman in a wheelchair, talking about something, their faces serene. "Look," Ethan pointed in their direction, a hint of nostalgia in his expression. "Do you remember when we were in college? I was drafted into the army and only saw you a few times a year. I used to call you secretly from under my covers, afraid the drill sergeant would catch me." Rhiannon's gaze softened, as if she too were lost in that memory. Back then, they had just started college, thinking they could finally have a public relationship. But Ethan's family had sent him to the Northwest to experience military life for 3 years. "You told me then that when we got old, whoever couldn't walk anymore, the other would be responsible for pushing them out to get some sun, and to go to the supermarket to buy groceries. You said we would die at home." "I'm sorry, but I died in a hospital," Rhiannon said, her face expressionless. "And I died a miserable death. I was at home, waiting happily for my husband to come back. I fell trying to answer the phone, blood everywhere. I screamed until my voice was hoarse, but no one heard. In the end, I gave birth to my child alone in the hospital, while my husband was out having a good time." Ethan's eyes shook violently. He reached out as if to stroke her hair. Rhiannon slapped his hand away. "If you're trying to play the nostalgia card, I suggest you don't bother. The pain of the past is too deeply ingrained to be forgotten. I'm only back to save Daisy. I have no intention of getting back together with you. Please stop being so presumptuous, Mr. Crawford." She spat out the words, "Mr. Crawford," coldly and turned to leave. Ethan's gaze followed her slender but strong back, the regret in his heart once again consuming him. Rhiannon walked back to her room, her face a mask of calm, but only she knew how much pain she was in. It was as if she had returned to those desperate, painful moments, every second wanting to die, yet every second struggling to live. This was why she couldn't forgive Ethan. Pain could fade with time, but the feelings from back then were carved into her very bones. How could she just forgive and forget? Besides, she was doing fine now. No one would die without the other, right? It was just a pity for Daisy and Leo. Hopefully, time would lessen their longing for a mother. And Ethan was taking good care of the 2 children. Her presence or absence wouldn't cause any emotional deficiencies. As she was thinking this, a small figure appeared at the door of her room. Rhiannon looked over and met Daisy's gaze. The girl was holding the doll Rhiannon had given her yesterday, her expression filled with an adult-like sorrow. "Mama, are you going to leave Daddy?" Chapter 29, Daisy stood in the doorway of the hospital room, her head tilted as she looked at her, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Rhiannon pursed her lips, suddenly feeling a bit cruel. No mother could bear to abandon her child and run off to a foreign land, living a comfortable life while her child wondered what their father thought, whether they missed her. She stepped forward and hugged Daisy, whispering, "Mama is sorry." Like a little adult, Daisy patted Rhiannon's hair and comforted her back. "Mama, Daisy is doing very well, really. Daddy just looks a bit fierce, but he loves us very much." Daisy said that although she was scared to death at first, living with Ethan every day, she eventually discovered that her daddy was the most amazing daddy in the world. He would take them on pirate ship rides and carefully pick out the fish bones for her at dinner. Although he looked fierce, he took care of her and her brother's daily needs with meticulous detail, and he would risk his life to save her. Because of her special experiences, Daisy was much more mature than other children her age. After spending a long time with Ethan, she could naturally understand the helpless heart beneath his cold exterior when it came to her and her brother. As for the time he locked her in a room and threatened to throw her into the water, those memories had slowly faded with over a year of being together. Rhiannon carried Daisy into the room and placed her on the bed, not commenting on Daisy's efforts to paint Ethan in a good light. She sat by the bed and began to peel a pear. Seeing that her mother didn't seem to be moved, Daisy pursed her lips and swallowed the rest of her words. The day of the surgery drew closer, and Ethan's anxiety grew. He would rush to the hospital multiple times a day. Eventually, he simply rented 2 beds in the room next to Rhiannon's and brought his work to the hospital. At the same time, he sent every conceivable gift to please a woman to Rhiannon's room. Sometimes, Rhiannon would wake up to find a bouquet of roses at her door with a card filled with cheesy romantic words. Sometimes, as she was walking in the sky garden, Ethan would slip a box of heart-shaped chocolates into her hand. Rhiannon shook her head. If this were in the past, she would have been ecstatic for a whole year even if he had just given her a pebble, let alone chocolate. She was getting old, she thought. She couldn't handle all this romantic nonsense anymore. In the end, half of the chocolates ended up in Leo's mouth, making Ethan so angry he threatened to spank him. Rhiannon had to intervene. The picture of a happy family of 4 stung Luke's eyes when he came to visit. That evening, Rhiannon met a silent Luke in the garden. Ethan raised an eyebrow and stood protectively in front of her. Leo, in a show of solidarity, also puffed out his little chest and stood in front of Rhiannon. He didn't know Luke, so any attitude was acceptable. Rhiannon's mouth twitched. She pushed the big and small figures aside. "What are you two doing? Did you see a biochemical weapon?" Ethan said gloomily, "If it were a biochemical weapon, I wouldn't be this nervous." After a glare from Rhiannon, he reluctantly shut up, but the aura he exuded clearly said, "If you take one more step, I'll crush you." Luke stood 5 steps away from Rhiannon and said with a bitter smile, "I knew I shouldn't have agreed to send you back." Rhiannon opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Ethan shot back, "You should be glad you sent her back yourself." Otherwise, Ethan narrowed his eyes. If he had found her, he wouldn't have been so polite. Rhiannon patted his hand, her tone annoyed. "What are you talking about?" Then she turned to Luke. "Luke, I'm sorry, he's always been like this." A lump formed in Luke's throat, and he was at a loss for words. Just before leaving the US, she had sworn she wouldn't have anything to do with Ethan. Now, she was apologizing to him as if she were family. "Rhiannon, who are you to him? On what grounds are you apologizing to me on his behalf?" But Rhiannon didn't seem to realize the impropriety of her tone. She turned and glared at Ethan again. "Don't talk nonsense next time." Her tone was that of a family member scolding another. Luke's expression changed several times. Finally, he said, "Rhiannon, I want to talk to you alone." No, Ethan, who had been quiet, immediately objected, his gaze like daggers on Luke, wishing he would just disappear. Luke seemed to ignore his provocation and just smiled at Rhiannon. Rhiannon froze for a moment, then patted Ethan's back. "You take Leo back. I'll be there in a minute." Ethan stood his ground, his eyes like ice. Rhiannon had to put on a stern face. "Are you going or not?" Ethan finally picked up Leo and left with a dark face, not forgetting to give Luke a harsh warning before he went. But Luke was not afraid of his warnings. He just smiled faintly. When Ethan was gone, he turned his gaze to Rhiannon. Rhiannon nervously fiddled with her neck, looking at the sky, the ground, her toes anywhere but at Luke. They were silent for a long time before Luke finally spoke. "Rhiannon, do you regret it?" "Huh." Rhiannon was baffled and asked a very foolish question. "Regret what?" The moment she asked, she realized her mistake and wanted to sew her mouth shut. But it was too late. Luke, as if a dam had broken, continued. For example, when I made the decision to fake your death and take you to the US without your consent, without even bringing Daisy, and without letting you see your newborn child. Oh, that. Rhiannon touched her nose. That was to save me. I don't hold it against you. Or for forcing you to recuperate in the US, I know you were doing it for my own good. Or for hiding the news that Daisy was looking for a donor. Or for demanding that you come back with me to the US after the surgery and cut off all contact with Ethan. Rhiannon fell silent. At this point, she didn't know what to say. Rhiannon, you must think I'm despicable. Luke, standing in front of her, suddenly raised his hand, his voice choked with emotion. Chapter 30, Rhiannon stared blankly at the man covering his face, her heart tightening. To be honest, it would be a lie to say she wasn't moved. For the past few years, Luke had been nothing but attentive to her, maintaining a gentlemanly distance while going to great lengths to help her. As an old friend used to say, even a stone would have been warmed by his devotion. But back then, Rhiannon hadn't thought much of it. It wasn't until she discovered she was pregnant and had leukemia that she, in a panic, turned to him. He had taken her abroad without hesitation, and she had given birth to Daisy there. Those years abroad were probably the most peaceful time of her life. Later, when she had to return to the country and was misunderstood by Ethan, Luke had continued to care for her silently, never trying to interfere in their relationship or acting inappropriately toward her. Even this time, when he insisted she return to the US after the surgery, it was out of concern for her, fearing she would be hurt again. It would be a lie to say she wasn't grateful, but it was only gratitude. In this life, she had already exhausted herself loving one person. She simply didn't have the energy to start another relationship. Rhiannon slowly raised her hand and took Luke's hand from his face. She looked at him and said, word by word, "No, I have never thought you were despicable." Luke's eyes were red, his gaze a mix of infatuation and sorrow. Then, why did you suddenly change your mind about going back? If it wasn't because you were tricked by Ethan's sweet words again, what other reason could there be? Rhiannon's voice was strained. Luke, it's impossible between Ethan and me. Don't overthink it. Luke spoke slowly, his voice hoarse. Rhiannon, I don't mean anything else. I'm just afraid you'll get hurt again. I understand, Rhiannon interrupted, as if making a huge decision. Don't worry. After the surgery, I'll go back to the US with you. As for here, she gritted her teeth. Everything here has nothing to do with me anymore. Rhiannon, Luke whispered her name, his voice filled with an infinite tenderness. Rhiannon subtly turned her gaze away. Although Luke had gotten what he wanted, their hearts had grown distant. On the day of the surgery, just as Rhiannon was being wheeled into the operating room, Ethan's heart suddenly pounded. His body moved before his mind could, and he rushed forward, grabbing her hand. I'll be waiting for you when you come out, he said solemnly. Rhiannon patted his hand reassuringly before being pushed into the operating room. The surgery went smoothly. The bone marrow transplant was a success, and Daisy was finally free from the congenital disease. But Ethan was going crazy, because Rhiannon had run away again. This time, she didn't even leave a note. She just walked out of the hospital. All he received was a 2-word text message. No need. No need is a bit cold but fits the abrupt tone. Take care or don't worry might also work, but this feels more final. By the time Ethan got to the airport, the plane had already taken off. If it weren't for the recovering Daisy who needed his care, he would have flown over immediately. By the time Daisy was discharged, 2 months had passed. Ethan, burning with impatience, left the still recovering Daisy with a maid and, holding the younger child, flew to Texas without delay. But when he arrived at the villa where Rhiannon and Luke were staying, he hesitated, afraid to go in. Not far away, Rhiannon was trimming the roses in the yard with a pair of shears. She looked well, as serene as a painting. Ethan stared, as if he had traveled back 4 years in time and was once again seeing the carefree Rhiannon who had been by his side. If they hadn't had those misunderstandings and hurts, would she not be trying to escape from him time and time again? But there were no ifs. A figure emerged from the villa. It was Luke, the person Ethan least wanted to see. He was carrying a teapot, which he placed on a low table by the steps. Then he took the shears from Rhiannon and patiently helped her with the flowers. Rhiannon wiped her sweat and sat down by the table, pouring a cup of tea for Luke to cool. Ethan's eyes grew darker and more inscrutable. After a long moment, he put Leo down, patted his little bottom, and pointed to the charming figure in the yard. "Do you see Mommy?" Leo nodded vigorously. "When I knock on the door, you stand in front of me. When you see Mommy open the door, you hug her leg and don't let go, understand?" Ethan said with a serious expression. Leo nodded his big head, then, after a moment, asked his dad, "Why?" Ethan's eyes narrowed as he began to coax his son. "Do you want Mommy to cook for you? I'll let you have all the candy from now on." "Yes," Leo answered without hesitation this time. "Then listen to me. When the time comes, rush over and hug her leg. If you hold on tight and don't let go, Daddy will reward you with a candy today." Ethan magically produced a candy and waved it in front of Leo. And so, Leo trotted off on his little short legs to knock on the gate. Ethan's face was a mask of exasperation. What do you do when your own son has no integrity? Rhiannon opened the gate, and before she could see who it was, her leg was hugged. She looked down to see Leo looking up at her with big, hopeful eyes, like he was looking at a human-sized candy. She looked at Ethan in surprise, but the man opposite her just said, his face expressionless, "The boy wants milk." Leo nodded his head wildly. "Well, candy milk is still milk, right? As long as there's candy." Rhiannon was stunned by the shameless father-son duo, black lines running down her face, speechless for a moment. Just then, Luke's voice came from the yard. "Rhiannon, who is it?" Rhiannon shouted back, "No one, just a minute." Ethan's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. Rhiannon pushed him into a corner. "How did you find me here?" "No, wait, why are you here?" Ethan pointed to his son, who was still dutifully acting as a leg pendant. He continued with his deadpan expression, "The boy wants milk." "Good son, Daddy will give you 2 candies. Rhiannon's eye twitched. "Who are you kidding? Leo has never been breastfed. He's 2 now, well past the age of drinking milk. How could he possibly want milk?" Just then, Leo chimed in perfectly, "Mama, I want milk." "Rhiannon, your dad for it." She turned to close the gate but was held fast by Leo, who clearly intended to go in with her. Rhiannon sighed and tried to pry Leo off her leg. At that moment, Ethan grabbed her hand and squeezed into the yard. Chapter 31, "Hey, what are you doing?" Rhiannon frantically tried to pull Ethan back, but he held her hand tightly. "Let go of me, Luke is still inside," she whispered, feeling inexplicably guilty. A meaningful smile touched Ethan's lips. "I want Luke to see exactly whose woman you are." Rhiannon. They stumbled into the yard, and as expected, Rhiannon saw Luke looking over in surprise, his gaze fixed on the hand Ethan was holding. Unable to shake him off, Rhiannon tried to explain, "Luke, listen to me." "Say what?" But Ethan cut her off, smiling. "Say that your son wants to drink?" "Shut up," Rhiannon roared in embarrassment. Ethan touched his nose, knowing she was thin-skinned, and didn't continue. Rhiannon turned to Luke again, only to see him glance over indifferently and walk away. A mix of emotions churned within her, and it was not a pleasant feeling. Ethan raised an eyebrow, his gaze on Rhiannon filled with a new depth of thought. "It's a good thing I came when I did. If I had waited any longer, my wife might have developed feelings for someone else." No matter how much Rhiannon protested, Ethan settled in. No one welcomed him, so he took his son and found a spare bedroom, then went out to buy all the necessary daily items, looking like he was planning to stay for a long time. Rhiannon was at her wit's end. She couldn't very well call the police, and when Leo looked at her with his big, pleading eyes, the words of refusal died on her lips. So she had to let them stay. On the first day, Ethan set up a video call with Daisy back in China. The father and daughter critiqued everything from the room's decor to the furniture. Rhiannon sat on the sofa, fuming, but in the end, her longing got the better of her, and she talked to Daisy for a while. Daisy looked much better and even cheerfully told her dad and brother not to come back too soon, to stay a little longer. Rhiannon's whole body went rigid. Fortunately, Ethan took the phone into the room. He leaned against the door and lowered his voice. "Are you upset that Daddy didn't bring you?" Daisy's little face on the screen fell, and Ethan's heart clenched. The next second, she smiled and poked the screen, as if she were poking Ethan's face. "Daddy, Daisy will get better here, and then I'll come over. You have to work hard to bring Mommy back, okay?" Ethan looked at Daisy and smiled, his heart filled with a tender affection. Daisy needed to rest after her surgery, and he didn't know how long this battle with Rhiannon would take. Although bringing Daisy would have been a good way to play the family card, after much consideration, he had decided against it and left her in China. He felt guilty toward the child, so her well-being was his top priority. Hearing her words, he couldn't help but feel relieved. Just then, Leo, who had been quietly watching the video in his lap, also poked the screen and said in a small, milky voice, "Sister, I want candy." Ethan came back to his senses, propped the phone up for Leo, and let the siblings chat. He came out of the bedroom to see Rhiannon carrying groceries into the kitchen. He unconsciously followed her. Chapter 30, Rhiannon wasn't used to the local food, so she usually cooked her own meals. Fortunately, there was a Chinese supermarket nearby. The ingredients were expensive, but the selection was complete. She took out a cucumber, thinking that Leo liked smashed cucumber salad, and decided to make some for him. Just then, the cucumber was taken from her hand. Rhiannon looked up to see Ethan naturally taking the cucumber and washing it under the tap. From her angle, his profile was exactly the same as it was when they lived together, but the Ethan of the past would never have been in the kitchen. She remembered that he hated cooking, hated all the trivial household chores. I can do it myself," she stammered, trying to take it back, but Ethan had already washed it and was holding a knife over the cutting board, seemingly contemplating whether to slice it or chop it. Hearing her, he asked without looking up, "How do you want to make the cucumber?" "Smashed cucumber salad," she answered automatically. At that, Ethan looked up and smiled at her. His eyes were naturally dark, and the smile made Rhiannon's heart, against her will, beat faster. She blushed and quickly ran out. And so, dinner was made by Ethan. 3 dishes and a soup, plus a small cold dish with fish, meat, and vegetables. When Rhiannon came to the table, she was almost stunned. Whether it was to deliberately avoid Ethan, Luke had called in the afternoon to say he wouldn't be back for dinner. Although Rhiannon was anxious, there was nothing she could do. "I need to find some time to talk things over with Ethan." But before she had a chance, she was conquered by the feast in front of her and didn't bring it up. Before eating, Ethan made a point to video call Daisy for a while before putting his phone down to focus on feeding Leo. Leo usually ate with a spoon himself, but Rhiannon's house didn't seem to have any. Ethan was afraid he would poke himself with the chopsticks, so he had to feed him. Leo was clearly very satisfied with his dad's cooking, taking one bite after another. Rhiannon ate with her head down, thinking that Ethan must be taking very good care of the children. Her return wasn't really necessary. In a few years, when the children were older, their longing for her as a mother would gradually fade. At this thought, her heart twinged, and the food in her mouth lost its flavor. After all, she had carried them for 10 months. The thought of them calling someone else Mama in the future still made her uncomfortable. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan's voice interrupted her thoughts. She came back to her senses to see him placing a piece of spicy chicken in her bowl. The red chili oil was glistening and looked appetizing, but she put down her bowl and said faintly, "I'm full, you guys eat." Then she turned and left. She didn't see that the moment she turned, Ethan's hand, holding a piece of cucumber, trembled, and the cucumber fell from his chopsticks. He looked at her with an expression both deep and complex. That night, Rhiannon sat on the bay window with a blanket, staring into space for a long time. When she felt her bottom go numb, she slowly got up. "I'm thirsty. I'll go get a glass of water from the living room." To get to the living room, she had to pass Ethan's room. She didn't want to, so she took the long way around, coming down the other side of the stairs. Just then, she heard a rustling sound from the living room below. Chapter 30, Rhiannon's heart leaped into her throat. The lights downstairs were all off, leaving the space in complete darkness, which made the sound even more pronounced. It sounded like someone was trying to pour something, a soft, rustling sound. Rhiannon could even imagine the person's hand shaking, unable to get the contents out. "Luke, are you back?" Rhiannon called out bravely. Suddenly, the air went still, followed by the sound of something falling to the floor. Standing on the stairs, Rhiannon was startled by the noise and quickly flipped the light switch. A bright, almost blinding light instantly flooded the living room. Rhiannon froze at the sight before her. Ethan was curled up in a corner by the sofa, a bottle lying at his feet, white pills scattered all over the floor. He had been trying to pick up the pills when the light suddenly came on. He shielded his eyes from the glare, his own eyes a frightening shade of red. Rhiannon paused for a moment, then walked over to him, pretending to be calm. "Oh, you're just taking some medicine. Why didn't you turn on a light? It's so dark you could have fallen." She poured him a glass of warm water and then knelt to pick up the bottle, her eyes quickly scanning the label. Just that one glance made her hand tremble, and the bottle almost rolled away again. It was the same anti-anxiety medication. She had asked the doctor about it back in China. The doctor had said that taking too much of it could lead to drug resistance. Insomnia, irritability, mental instability. She looked up, her gaze meeting Ethan's bloodshot eyes. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed to have calmed down. He took the bottle from her, casually poured out 2 pills, and swallowed them with the water she had given him. He then gave her a smile. "Did I scare you? I just came down to take my medicine. I didn't want to turn on the light and wake you, so I tried to do it in the dark. I didn't expect you to come down too," he said, a hint of self-reproach in his eyes. "How long has it been?" Rhiannon asked suddenly. "What?" Ethan asked reflexively. "I'm asking you, how long has this been going on?" Rhiannon found it hard to control her anger, and her voice rose. Ethan was taken aback, then smiled bitterly. "It started the day I found out you were dead. At first, it was just insomnia. He was fine during the day, but at night, he had to rely on sleeping pills to get any rest. Then the sleeping pills stopped working, and a growing, violent urge began to fester within him. Regret, pain, self-blame, all these emotions mixed together, making him want to smash things, to see blood. He was afraid of hurting the children, so he had gotten the anti-anxiety medication from the doctor and just endured it. For the past few years, the doctor had repeatedly suggested he see a psychiatrist for treatment, but he had always been negative about it, so it had dragged on until now. Although it was just one sentence, Rhiannon was so angry she was trembling. When she left him, it wasn't her choice, but she had hoped he would take care of himself, stay healthy, and raise their children. But in just a few years, he had let himself get into this state. Did he think that by torturing himself, she would forgive him? No, never. She took a deep look at the man standing before her, his lips pressed tightly together, and turned to leave without hesitation. She wasn't going to talk to someone like that, but the next second, she was pulled into a hard, warm embrace. Chapter 34. Ethan held her tightly, his face buried in her shoulder, and murmured, "No, don't go. Please, don't give up on me." Rhiannon almost laughed in disbelief. "You're about to give up on yourself. What right do you have to ask me not to give up on you?" Ethan held her even tighter, his voice seemingly choked with emotion. "I haven't. I don't dare to die. Daisy and Leo need me. At least until they're grown, and then you can go ahead and become a complete basket case." Rhiannon's tone was icy. The body holding her trembled. Ethan fell silent. A patch of warmth spread on her neck. The words Rhiannon was about to say died on her lips. After a long moment, she gently pushed against his heavy body. "Get off. You've taken your medicine, now go to sleep." Pushed by her, Ethan stumbled back, on the verge of falling. Startled, Rhiannon quickly reached out to catch him. Just then, Ethan used her momentum to pull her back into his arms and kissed her. "MMM." His hot tongue invaded her mouth, exploring every corner with an aggressive, possessive heat. Rhiannon's body was on fire. His familiar hands roamed her body, stoking the flames. Just like in countless nights 2 years ago, her body went limp, almost melting in his embrace. At that moment, a soft click of a door opening made them both turn to look. A dark figure rushed forward, pushed Rhiannon aside, and punched Ethan squarely in the face. Caught off guard, Ethan took the blow but quickly retaliated. The two men were soon locked in a fierce brawl. "Stop it," Rhiannon watched as Luke and Ethan fought, her heart filled with anxiety, but she was helpless to intervene. All she could do was repeatedly scream for them to stop. But it was as if both men had gone deaf. They didn't stop until they were both exhausted and bruised, each retreating to a corner of the sofa, silent. Rhiannon brought out the first aid kit and placed it on the coffee table, then returned to her room with a cold face. "Do whatever you want. I'm not taking care of you anymore." Ethan and Luke each occupied a corner of the sofa, neither of them touching the first aid kit, just sneering at each other. After a long while, Luke finally spoke, his tone hostile. "Rhiannon has a kind heart. You're the great CEO of the Crawford family. You can mess with anyone. Why do you have to come and bother her again?" Ethan retorted, "You're no better. You took her away without her consent, and you left Daisy behind to tie me down. There's a term for people like you online now, green tea bitch. I think it describes you perfectly." Luke's face changed. He stood up from the sofa and demanded, his voice cold, "So what if I am? Every step I took was for her own good. She'll understand." "Is that so?" Tying her down with emotional debt, making her feel grateful and guilty, afraid to leave you. "That's not for her own good, that's emotional blackmail," Ethan said without even looking up. The veins on Luke's forehead throbbed. Paired with the bruises on his face, he looked almost ferocious. He looked down at Ethan and said slowly, "So what? Don't you understand? As long as I want, Rhiannon will never go back to China with you." Chapter 35. Rhiannon had been feeling troubled lately. It wasn't that she didn't have feelings for Ethan, but the painful memories between them made her afraid to take his hand again, afraid to suffer that kind of pain once more. And then there was Luke. He had been so devoted to her these past few years, he had even saved her life. She had promised him she wouldn't have anything to do with Ethan, but Ethan's mental state was far from good. It would be a lie to say she wasn't worried. The children were still young, and with Ethan so unstable, she couldn't rest easy. Convincing herself with this reasoning, Rhiannon knocked on Ethan's door. Ethan was sitting on the edge of the bed, lost in thought. When he saw her come in, he put a finger to his lips, then tucked the sleeping Leo in before pulling her out of the room. "Does it hurt now? What were you thinking before?" Rhiannon ignored Ethan's hisses of pain and applied a bandage to his cut chin. Ethan touched his chin and said with a grin, "What if I'm disfigured?" Rhiannon glanced at him. With his chin tilted up, his jawline was beautifully defined. Even with a small scar, he would probably look even more masculine. Realizing she was distracted, Rhiannon pursed her lips. After applying the last of the ointment to a bruise, she picked up the first aid kit and left without a word. Ethan's eyes darkened as he watched her walk into Luke's room with the first aid kit. His lips moved, but in the end, he said nothing. Some things needed to be laid bare by her. He wouldn't act impulsively like he used to. He was willing to give her more time. Rhiannon stood outside the door for a long time before finally mustering the courage to knock on Luke's door. When the door opened, Luke, also bruised, appeared before her. She clutched the first aid kit, her voice a little guilty. Luke's gaze fell on her hands, then he looked away and stepped aside to let her in. Rhiannon entered his bedroom with a sense of trepidation. Although they had lived together for almost 2 years, she had never been in his bedroom, study, or any other private space. This was the first time she had ever knocked on a man's door other than Ethan's. Luke's bedroom was as warm and comfortable as he was. It even had a small adjoining room with a coffee table and chairs, like an enclosed balcony. He led her to the coffee table and carefully poured her a cup of tea, but he didn't ask why she was knocking on his door in the middle of the night. Rhiannon opened her mouth, at a loss for words. She pushed the first aid kit toward him. "You should treat this. Today, I'm sorry." Luke's hand trembled and tea almost spilled. He looked up at Rhiannon, his eyes deep and dark, making her feel a little uneasy. "Rhiannon, in what capacity are you apologizing to me?" Rhiannon shrank back, suddenly realizing she had said something wrong. In what capacity was she apologizing? As Ethan's wife, lover, family? Realizing her mistake, she pushed the first aid kit a little further and pursed her lips. "You know that's not what I meant." But Luke, who was usually so gentle, didn't let it go. He asked, "Then what did you mean?" His expression was so sharp that she almost didn't recognize him. She frowned, her face showing her displeasure, but she couldn't say anything. She pursed her lips and prepared to leave, but as she turned, Luke grabbed her hand. "Rhiannon, that's not what I meant," he said anxiously. Rhiannon pulled her hand away and said faintly, "You're overthinking it, you're my savior. Even if you did mean it, it's normal. It's almost 4 o'clock. You should get some rest." With that, she left the room, leaving Luke standing there, stunned for a long time. The moment Rhiannon closed her bedroom door, she deflated. "He says 2 words to you and you get angry. Rhiannon, you're such a coward." She berated herself internally. And so, the first attempt at a courageous conversation ended in failure. Time passed slowly. Luke came back less and less often, while Ethan's shamelessness grew stronger. A few days ago, he had even brought Leo over, claiming he had nightmares sleeping alone, and tried to share her bed. Looking at the dark circles under his eyes and his bloodshot eyes at night, Rhiannon didn't have the heart to kick him out. With Leo between them, it was unlikely Ethan would try anything, and sure enough, he just lay there and slept. But even so, his mental state improved day by day. He used to need medicine to sleep every night. It had been 3 days since he last took any. Rhiannon watched Ethan making breakfast in the kitchen, a sense of relief in her eyes. Even if their fate was no longer intertwined, she still wanted him to take care of himself. Ethan came out with a freshly fried egg and called out, "Breakfast is ready." Rhiannon answered with a slow, "Okay." Leo was already sitting properly at the table, waiting for his food. Ethan ruffled the little one's hair and said to Rhiannon with a smile, "You guys eat first. I'll go heat up the milk." He then turned and went into the kitchen, as if it were the most natural morning between a husband and wife. Rhiannon chewed on her egg and asked Leo in a low voice, "Does your dad cook for you at home too?" Leo nodded his big head vigorously. Yes, Daddy's cooking is delicious." He was young and didn't remember things well. If it were Daisy, she would have a different story to tell. When Leo was first born, he was not in good health, and the hospital had prescribed many nutritional supplements. Every time Ethan tried to cook, the kitchen looked like it had been through a fire. It was only because he had 2 children at home, and he couldn't have the nanny cook every day, that he slowly learned. At least, before Leo could eat solid food, Daisy had endured a period of Ethan's dark cuisine. Hearing her little son praise his dad without hesitation, Rhiannon felt a strange emotion. She asked mischievously, "What do you hate most about your dad?" It was a childish question. If Ethan were there, he would probably laugh at her. Fortunately, he wasn't. Leo, being a little turnip, didn't understand. He tilted his head and thought for a moment. Leo doesn't hate Daddy, Leo likes Daddy. He even emphasized the like. Rhiannon was not convinced. But if you had to say one thing. Leo looked at her, then at Ethan in the kitchen. He lowered his head and whispered, "Leo hates that Daddy doesn't have a mommy." Chapter 36, that breakfast was tasteless. After they finished eating, Ethan pulled his son aside and pretended to be angry. "Did you say something to your mom? She didn't even finish her breakfast today." It broke his heart to see it. Leo just giggled, not about to tell his dad. Ethan pressed his temples and threatened the smiling Leo. "Don't you dare make your mom angry, you hear me? Or I'll send you back." Scared, Leo quickly hugged his dad's leg and, shaking his big head, recounted his conversation with Rhiannon word for word. Ethan frowned, then finally patted Leo's head with a pained expression. "Be good," he said in a heavy voice. "We'll take it slow. Let's not push your mom, okay?" Leo nodded, though he didn't fully understand. Ethan looked at his little turnip of a son and sighed silently. How long could he wait? 10 years? 20? Even if he was willing to wait, the children might not be. "Rhiannon, please say yes soon." But Rhiannon was completely unaware of the father and son's scheming. She was currently agonizing over how to tactfully suggest they go back. She had thought of a million ways, but none of them were ones she had the heart to carry out. Until one day, Ethan said he wanted to take her shopping. Rhiannon thought it would be a good idea to talk things over outside, at least not in front of the child. With this in mind, she went with Ethan to eat, buy clothes, and watch a movie, doing all the things a couple on a date would do. They were now walking side by side on a street in New York. It was a famous Chinatown, crowded with people. The leaves of the plane trees on both sides of the road swirled down, much like Rhiannon's own swirling emotions. How can I bring it up without making it too awkward? She looked down at her feet. Suddenly, her hand was taken, and she heard Ethan's surprised voice. "Look." Rhiannon followed his gaze. Right in front of her was a person with a sign hanging around their neck. It said in Chinese, "Please follow the arrow." Rhiannon thought it was some kind of promotional gimmick and was about to leave, but Ethan held her wrist. "Let's go check it out." His eyes were sparkling. Rhiannon's heart softened. Well, after today, we'll be saying goodbye anyway. I'll just go along with him. So she followed the arrow. Being her usual oblivious self, she didn't notice that if it were a business promotion, there wouldn't be a single pedestrian following the arrow. Along the way, people kept holding up signs, pointing her in a certain direction. She followed the arrows, and the crowd gradually thinned out until she stopped in front of a large tree. It was an old locust tree with a huge canopy. As she stood there, a young man who had been waiting for her handed her an envelope, quickly said, "May the Lord bless you with happiness," and walked away. Only then did Rhiannon realize that Ethan had disappeared at some point. She knew it was his doing. She held the thin envelope, her mind a battlefield of emotions. In the end, she opened it. "Dear Rhiannon, are you a little angry reading this letter?" "Yes, you know I'm angry and you still pull these stunts." Rhiannon grumbled to herself and continued reading. When I received your farewell letter, my anger was probably greater than yours is now. Rhiannon's hand trembled. It took all her strength to continue reading. Actually, I can't really call it anger. It was all my own fault. If I had been more patient, less impulsive, we wouldn't have worn our love down to nothing. Rhiannon, you're right not to forgive me. I hurt you so deeply, I don't deserve your forgiveness. It's just that the children are so young, I don't want them to grow up without a mother. It's also a bit of a selfish wish on my part. Even though I know my mistakes are unforgivable, I'm still shamelessly asking you. Rhiannon, I love you. I can't live without you. If you're willing to let go of the past and be with me, please look up now. If you're not, please turn and leave. I promise I will never bother you again. I have already transferred 61 of Crawford Corp's shares to you. I plan to leave the rest to Daisy and Leo, half and half. Don't worry, even if you don't agree, I won't take back the shares. From now on, whether I'm here or not, I hope this wealth will ensure you a life without worries. Every word was sincere, every sentence filled with genuine emotion. Rhiannon's hand, holding the letter, trembled more and more violently. She grabbed it with her other hand, her heel turning slightly backward. Then she stopped abruptly and slowly looked up. In the middle of the old locust tree's huge canopy, Ethan was sitting on a thick branch near the ground, his handsome eyebrows and starry eyes crinkling with a smile. He jumped down from the tree and put the ring he had prepared on her finger. A sense of being bound came from her ring finger. Rhiannon's eyes reddened, and she looked up at the handsome man with a smile in his eyes. Ethan held her hand, his voice choked with emotion. Rhiannon, I knew you couldn't bear to leave me. I, Ethan Crawford, swear that from now on I will dote on you alone. I will make up for all my mistakes. Whatever you want, I will get it for you. From now on, I will make you live like a princess, no, like a queen. He held her and spun her around in excitement, but Rhiannon's expression grew more and more sorrowful. This is it, Rhiannon. It's time to end it. He excitedly put her down. Only then did he notice the strange expression on her face. A sudden panic seized him. He cupped her face and asked, "What's wrong? Is something wrong? Tell me, I can change anything." Before he could finish, Rhiannon pushed him away violently. Then, a sharp sting on his face. Rhiannon took the ring from her finger and threw it at him. "Who wants your ring?" You jerk the ring, still warm from her body, slid down his face and rolled under a nearby trash can. Ethan stared at her, stunned, at a loss for words. "But you looked up," you agreed. "Why, Rhiannon?" Rhiannon stepped back, avoiding his outstretched hand. She threw the letter to the ground, straightened her clothes, and said coldly, "Now you know how I felt when I was being played with." She sneered, turned, and walked away without looking back. Chapter 37. Ethan left, and Luke returned. Everything seemed to have gone back to square one. Luke had successfully used the rift between them to separate them, but he felt little satisfaction. The night Rhiannon broke things off with Ethan, she went to a bar and got drunk, nearly being taken advantage of by a man there. Ethan, on the other hand, had taken Leo and left the US that very night, as if he couldn't bear to stay a moment longer. The next day, Rhiannon woke up and sat on the balcony, staring into space for a long time. From then on, she grew more and more silent and rapidly lost weight. Luke, unable to watch her continue in this state, quit his job and took her on a trip around the world. Their first stop was Tokyo, Japan. Rhiannon stayed in a Japanese-style hotel and happened to see a woman holding a child. She stared at them for a long time. Their second stop was the famous Bulgarian snow mountains, but Rhiannon complained of the cold and refused to go on the sleigh with him. For their third stop, Luke took her to the most beautiful sea in Sri Lanka. Rhiannon covered her eyes and cried. Ethan had once dreamed of coming here with her for their honeymoon. Some feelings you don't notice when you're together. It's only when you're apart that the pain becomes more acute. For the first time, Rhiannon grabbed Luke's hand and said she wanted to go home. Luke's heart sank. He knew he was being unreasonable, but he couldn't bring himself to agree. He was about to end the disastrous trip and take her back to the US when she fell ill the next day. She had a high fever that wouldn't go down. Luke was forced to stay in Sri Lanka, waiting for her to get better. Beijing, China. Ethan held the sleeping Leo in his arms and gave Daisy, who had come to open the door, a bitter smile. "I'm sorry, Daisy. Daddy failed his mission." Daisy's excited little face quickly fell, but she still dutifully welcomed him home. Ethan looked terrible. He had a stubble, his eyes were bloodshot, and he exuded an air of exhaustion. Daisy carefully covered her sleeping brother with a blanket, then saw her dad lying on the sofa, the back of his hand pressed tightly against his eyelids, an aura of sadness enveloping him. Mommy wasn't willing to come back with Daddy. Daisy was sad about this too, but she had been through a lot in her short life, and at this point, she just felt empty, not crying and screaming like other children. She just brought him a glass of warm water and curled up quietly on the sofa, as if that could make him feel a little better. A cloud of gloom hung over the Crawford household. No one could muster any cheer. Ethan's insomnia seemed to be getting worse. He couldn't sleep all night, wishing he could just tie Rhiannon up and hide her away somewhere only he could see, so she would never leave him again. This thought tormented him every night, making him feel guilty for his selfishness, yet he couldn't help but indulge in the fantasy. Soon, it was time for school to start. Ethan had to pull himself together and take Daisy and Leo to school. Daisy was fine, but Leo had been crying for his mommy ever since he woke up. He not only refused to go to school, but also kicked and punched the teachers. In a fit of anger, Ethan had locked him up for 2 days. He was much more obedient after that. He would silently get in the car with the driver, take the breakfast from the table, and leave without a word. The usual morning greetings were gone. Ethan's heart ached. What could he do? He thought he had been shameless enough that he hadn't let Luke's taunts get to him. But Rhiannon's own words, her refusal to see him again? At this thought, a dull pain shot through his heart. If only her words hadn't been so final. If only there had been a little bit of room for compromise. One day, Leo's teacher called, asking if he was being bullied. Ethan thought about it. How could Leo be bullied? It was more likely he was the one doing the bullying. The teacher, speechless, hung up and sent him a picture, telling him that it was dangerous for a child to have such thoughts and that he hoped the parents would nip it in the bud. It was a drawing, or more accurately, a comic strip. It showed 4 little figures, clearly a family of 4, holding hands and walking. They were labeled Daddy, Mommy, Sister, and me. The second picture showed another person, completely blacked out, punching Daddy and snatching Mommy away. The third picture was a giant version of himself, sitting on the blacked-out person. It was obvious that the blacked-out person was Luke. If it were just that, it would have been just a child's fantasy, not worth a special call from the teacher. What was disturbing was that the third picture was filled with red, looking as if it had been splattered with blood. Even an adult would be a little scared to look at it. Ethan picked up Leo from school that day. Leo walked ahead with his little backpack, no longer asking to be held or being clingy, his little face serious. After he put his backpack away, Ethan took his hand, wanting to have a talk with his little son. "Leo, are you starting to hate Daddy?" Ethan asked with difficulty. Leo pursed his lips and turned his head away awkwardly. Even at his young age, he already knew that some things couldn't be solved by crying and screaming. Ethan's heart ached. Looking at his stubborn little son, he hardened his heart and said, "All right, Daddy will send you to Mommy's tomorrow. You can live with her from now on, okay?" But Leo violently shook off his hand and screamed. No, tears streamed down his face. "No, why do I have to leave Daddy? I want Mommy and I want Daddy too." A lump formed in Ethan's throat. He held his struggling son tight and choked out, "Daddy is sorry to Mommy. It's right that she doesn't forgive me. A person like me doesn't deserve a wife and children. I'm sorry." Ethan's spirit was also at its breaking point. If Leo's desire was just for a mother, then his need for Rhiannon had become a basic instinct. Like air, like water, an indispensable existence. He had already made up his mind. When Daisy came home from school, he would ask the 2 children for their opinion. If they were willing, he would give all his assets to the 3 of them, and he would go to a hospital. Not necessarily for treatment, but at least someone would be watching him. It was better than carrying it all by himself every day. When Daisy came back, it was already 6 p.m. The father and his 3 children sat on the living room sofa, facing a choice for the first time. Chapter 38. After a long silence, Daisy whispered, "I'm not going." Ethan was taken aback. He saw Daisy take his hand, her eyes sincere. "Mommy has Uncle Luke to be with her, but you have no one, Daddy." The fear she had once felt for him was real, but so was the affection she felt for him now. Over the past few years, she had watched him transform from a fumbling, overwhelmed new father into the man he was today. He had tried so hard to control his temper, to create a sense of home for them, to raise her and her brother all by himself. He could have easily left these tasks to a maid, but he did it all himself. Not because he was trying to prove a point, but because he genuinely cared for them. And her very life had been snatched from Cecilia's grasp by Ethan's own hands, at great risk to himself. Her younger brother was small and cried for their mother, but Daisy knew how hard the past few years had been for Ethan. She had no reason to abandon her father now. Leo also stopped crying, his swollen eyes looking at his father and sister. At only 3 years old, he just wanted his family to be together. He didn't understand the complex struggles and entanglements as deeply as Daisy did. Ethan's lips moved, his eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and relief as he looked at Daisy. He squeezed her hand and said, "Good girl, you take your brother to your mom's for a few days. Daddy is sick lately and needs to see a doctor." "Daddy, I'll go with you to the doctor," Daisy said quickly. But Ethan refused, insisting on sending her to the US. Luke came to pick up the children. Ethan said his goodbyes at the gate, never even seeing Rhiannon. After returning to the country, he immediately made an appointment with the doctor he had been planning to see and began treatment for his mental condition. The process was painful. Ethan didn't tell anyone. At night, when he couldn't sleep, he would take out his phone and look at the screensaver. It was a selfie of Rhiannon and the 2 children from before. He had subconsciously kept it. He tried to forget them, but he couldn't. 3 months passed in a flash. One day, Ethan, having just finished a session with his doctor, received a call from overseas. It was Rhiannon's voice, a voice he hadn't heard in a long time. "Ethan, I want to come home." Ethan's face went white. He stumbled back until he hit a wall, his voice urgent. "Rhiannon, where are you? Why do you sound so weak? Are you okay?" Before he could finish, the phone was taken by someone else. Luke's slightly cold voice came through. "If you don't want her to die, come to Sri Lanka." He then gave a hotel name and hung up. Ethan's trembling hand couldn't hold the phone. It slipped and crashed to the floor, shattering into pieces. He stood there for a full minute, frozen. A minute later, he booked the fastest flight to Sri Lanka, his heart a mix of excitement and trepidation as he rushed to the hotel Luke had mentioned. Luke saw that he didn't look well, but he simply nodded silently in response to Ethan's questions and led him to a room. Ethan tried to suppress the heart that was pounding in his throat and followed Luke to a small private villa with a pool. The door opened, and the gaunt figure before him made him freeze. Was that Rhiannon? She lay in bed, her eyes tightly closed, her face pale, her cheekbones sunken. Her delicate eyebrows were furrowed, like someone on the brink of death. Ethan slowed his breathing and walked slowly to her side. He knelt and took her hand. "It was burning hot. She has a fever. Why didn't you take her to the hospital? What did you tell me before?" Ethan hissed. Luke let out a sad laugh. "Do you think I don't want her to get better? I've tried all the medicine, but nothing works. The fever goes down, then comes back up. The doctor says it's a disease of the heart." Ethan's heart ached as he stroked Rhiannon's gaunt face. He was filled with a mix of anger and pain. "You're so careless. I finally got some meat on her bones, and you managed to waste it all away." Just then, Rhiannon's eyes opened. Her eyes were dull, but they lit up when she saw Ethan, then quickly dimmed again. She closed her eyes again and tried to push him away, murmuring, "It must be a dream again. You must be so angry with me right now. Why would you come looking for me?" Ethan's anger turned into a laugh. "I'm about to be angered to death by you." He then leaned in and covered her self-hypnotizing lips with his own. Her lips were not pleasant to taste, dry and cracked. Ethan licked them gently, as if they were a precious treasure. Rhiannon's eyes flew open. The next second, a sharp pain shot through Ethan's lip. He let out a cry and pulled back, only to see Rhiannon covering her mouth with one hand and pointing at him with the other, trembling. You, she couldn't get more than a few yous out before she collapsed back onto the bed. She was a patient, after all. That last burst of energy had drained her completely. But her eyes were still wide, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts a mystery. Ethan leaned in again and touched her forehead. "Are you sleeping, beauty? Now that you're awake, let's go to the hospital." He was about to wrap her in the blanket and carry her out when he heard her say his name. "Not Ethan, but Ethan," she said. "Ethan, I'm sorry." Ethan's body froze. He slowly turned his head to look at her, his vision suddenly blurring, and so did hers. As if the first word had opened a floodgate, she buried her face in his back and repeated, "I'm sorry." I'm sorry, I said all those things on purpose. I'm sorry, I really regret it. I'm sorry, Ethan, I still love you. Please don't leave me. Ethan held her tight, never to let go again. Seeing this, Luke left quietly. For the rest of his life, he never appeared before them again. 6 months later, Ethan and Rhiannon were married. On the day of the wedding, all the socialites of the capital were present. The well-wishers were endless. Ethan announced on the spot that he was transferring 60 of Crawford Corp's shares to Rhiannon, and that after his death, the 2 children would each inherit 20 of his shares, causing a huge uproar. But Ethan had already whisked Rhiannon away on their honeymoon. Sri Lanka, the blue sea stretching to the horizon. Ethan and Rhiannon sat side by side on the beach. Ethan solemnly put the ring on her finger and tapped her nose. "Don't you dare throw this one away." Rhiannon smiled shyly and took the initiative to kiss the man in front of her.